Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today we'll examine what happened in the US state of California in 2011. Dalene Carlson, a 23-year-old college student, relocated from Idaho to Stockton, California. She was looking forward to beginning a new chapter in her life while residing at her Aunt Maggie's house, but she never came home after going out to meet some friends on August 6, 2011. Beginning at 3:30 a.m. on August 7, her aunt called her multiple times but got no response. Worried, she informed the police about Dalene's disappearance. To find the truth, detectives started an investigation and used CCTV footage. Dalene was preparing to go out on Saturday night. Her cousin Cecily had plenty of time to acquaint her with the local nightlife, as college was still 3 months away. Cecily had a fever, so they stayed home instead of going to the Finnegan's pub to meet up with some more friends. Dalene had to return home by 1 in the morning after going to the bar by herself, but Maggie and Aggie started to worry when 1 in the morning rolled around and Dalene was still not home. Maggie repeatedly called Ellie but got no answer. Maggie stayed up all night calling Ellie's number every now and then, but as before, her niece didn't answer. Maggie searched for a plausible reason why Ellie hadn't come home. Dalene hadn't come home by morning, so she speculated that her niece might have spent the night at a friend's house. Maggie called the police when she realized she could not wait any longer. Despite receiving a report, the police believed Dalene had stayed at a friend's house following the party and would soon return. The investigators made the decision to hold off a bit longer. In the meantime, Dalene's family started their own inquiry. On social media, they announced Dalene's disappearance and urged anyone with information to get in touch with the police or her family. The day after Dalene's disappearance, August 8, 2011, the police opened an official investigation because her family suspected something terrible might have happened because it was out of character for her to simply vanish without warning anyone. Her Aunt Maggie's home was the first location the detectives visited. They wanted to talk to Dalene's relatives, see her in her room, and make sure none of them had anything to do with her disappearance. Danielle was a girl, like any other American. Her disappearance was extremely unusual, and she was young, attractive, and had big plans for the future. Detectives searched Dalene's room, but they found no evidence that she had fled her house. Her room contained all of her possessions, as well as a few documents. Cecily took a picture of Dalene wearing torn jeans and a brown and white striped top the night she vanished. Cecily informed Detective Dalene that they had frequently visited the Finn Pub's pub in the past, and that Dalene had planned to go there. The detectives then went to the bar to speak with the employees and perhaps obtain additional information. On the night Dalene vanished, the bar manager recalled seeing her in the street at around midnight. He described what had happened that evening, but he could not think of anything out of the ordinary. Thankfully, security cameras were present. Surveillance footage can greatly aid an investigation, even though it might not give a full picture. 2 operational security cameras in the bar recorded hours of Saturday night activity. The detectives made the decision to obtain a copy of the recordings and go over everything back at the police station, because it would have taken a long time to go through the footage. This, they hoped, would allow them to find out who Dalene had slept with, and more crucially, with whom she had left the bar. At first look, the tape appeared to be normal. On the street, young women and men congregated, smoking and chatting. It appeared to be a typical Saturday night in a pub, but they are drawn to one girl in particular. She's dressed in a striped top similar to the one from the day. Dalene is wearing a striped top in the final photo. She goes back to the bar at 1:40 and 0 in the morning. Another security camera is located inside, in the corridor close to the restrooms. Photo 41 is watched by detectives. After 61 minutes, she was observed consuming alcohol. She might have been a bit more exposed than normal. In a hallway full of young men, she is the only woman. Every person in this video could be a suspect, and even if they are not, they might be a witness. Dalene seems content and at ease as she watches the video. At 0:40 in the morning, detectives see a young man approaching her from behind and placing his arm around her waist, indicating that someone is about to approach too closely. A short while later, as she was going into the bathroom, a man with a beard and an outfit that was backwards passed her. Dalene, who was not particularly disturbed by the young man's presence, also didn't seem very happy to see him. As soon as they saw this video, The detectives knew they needed to find this man, so they talked to her friends and neighbors. They discovered once more that Jason Gilly was the man who had Dalene around his waist. Jason was well known to Dalene Cecily's cousin Cecily and her friends, who frequently got together at his house for an enjoyable evening. Investigators found Jason Gilly's home and spoke with him. They questioned him about where he was when Dalene vanished that night. Jason clarified that he had planned to take Dalene home after spending the evening with her, but he had to leave early due to his child's needs. Jason claimed that he came home by himself. He claimed that because his young son was ill, he left the bar at around 1 in the morning and got home at 1:30. He brought up another possible suspect. Jason suggested to the detectives that they should speak with Evangelisti. According to him, Evangelisti was seeing Jacob Evangelisti, but they had a fight in front of Jason 4 days prior to her disappearance. Because jealousy frequently leads people to act rashly, the detectives were interested in this information. Thus, they made the decision to learn more about Jacob Evangelisti. The investigators discovered some recent images of Jacob while searching through Dalene's social media accounts. To find out if Jacob was present, they made the decision to watch the bar's security footage again. They changed the video at 1:06, when Dalene left the eatery and went up to the man who was leaning against the wall. Dalene's behavior appears to drastically change when he is around. She seems to be very upset about something, as evidenced by the vigorous hand movements. The investigators attempt to determine whether it might be her boyfriend Jacob, but the bright lights make it impossible to see his face. After a few seconds of their brief conversation, Dalene left, leaving the detectives to keep watching and trying to figure out who the mystery man was. They finally recognize him as Jacob Evangelisti when he turns to face the camera. During the interview, detectives brought Jacob Evangelisti in to be questioned. Jacob appeared to be quite upset. He was asked about his relationship with Dalene by the detectives, who specifically wanted to know when and how he had last seen her. Jacob claimed that he and Dalene had last seen each other at a bar. Jacob disclosed that Dalene had ended their relationship that evening at Negan's bar. "I had no intention of ending my relationship with Dalene," he said. To be honest, he was furious that she had ended their relationship. Dalene had left the bar without him, Jacob later said. He adamantly denied any involvement in her disappearance. After that, the investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to see if it supports his account. Jacob walks into the bar at 1:09 in the morning. They keep on observing. Dalene enters the picture after Dalene. She seems to be bidding one of the patrons farewell. She then exits the frame at 1:15 a.m. The detectives kept going over the video until the bar had closed and all of the patrons had left. The lights go out at 2:38 a.m. When Day Nether appears again, the parking lot is almost deserted. It appeared that Jacob was responsible for Dalene's disappearance at this stage of the investigation. Investigators have not yet found any evidence that her disappearance was the result of foul play, but it's possible that he just couldn't move on from the fact that she had left him. Dalene's family is searching on their own, according to Dalene. They created flyers and began distributing them throughout the city. They wanted as many people as possible to know about Dalene's disappearance. After she left the bar, she might have been spotted by someone. Detectives ask Evangelisti if anyone knows what happened to her at the stock station. Evangelisti wants more, but he maintains his denial of any knowledge. James, another person in Dalene's social circle, is the name he gives instead. Dalene claims to have a new boyfriend. Dalene's social circle also includes James. They had a relationship, even though James wasn't Dalene's boyfriend. James was also a close friend, which was another interesting fact. Jason Gilly's pal. They actually shared the same home. Dalene's ability to enter into such a relationship and then vanish almost instantly afterward was highly intriguing. This sparked intense suspicion about James and the idea that he might have had something to do with her disappearance. James was asked to talk about his relationship with Dalene at the police station. Although he acknowledges that he and Dalene were romantically involved, he says he has no knowledge of the night she went to the bar. James had information he wanted to share, but he claimed to have been out of town when the police began looking into his alibi. He informed investigators that Dalene texted him to let them know she was with a new man after she disappeared. James verified that Dalene was there by showing the detectives his phone, which was Dalene's. Detectives came up with a new theory after she wrote that she was leaving the bar to go to a friend's party. but the friend's identity was still unknown. It is likely that Dalene had to visit the grocery store or the liquor store in order to continue the party. A list of 24-hour liquor stores has been compiled by investigators. Elisa was the name of the store that was closest to Finnegan's. When detectives arrived, they discovered that a Dalene was equipped with security cameras. The security cameras recorded Dalene if she was there. The detectives began watching the security camera footage outside. When Dalene saw her walking into the store with a young man, their suspicion was confirmed. However, who was he? Since the video only captured his back, a precise identification was not possible. Dalene and her enigmatic companion purchased what appeared to be a bottle of alcohol as the detectives started going over the footage from the other cameras. At 1:31 a.m., they waited for them to leave the store before switching back to the exterior camera. Detectives have a better picture after the couple leaves the store. The first face the detectives saw in the bar footage was the same as the one with the baseball cap and goatee on backwards. This gave them a new lead for their ongoing investigation when Jason Gilley noticed it. Jason initially claimed to investigators that he went home alone at 1:30 a.m. to tend to his ailing son after leaving Finnegan's bar. It was now evident to the police that he and Dalene had left the liquor store at 1:31 in the morning. Jason became the prime suspect right away because he had lied about leaving the bar by himself. Jason Gilley was taken into custody by the police 1 week after Dalene vanished. After an hour or so of waiting, the detectives started questioning him while keeping an eye on any behavioral changes. The detectives went over Jason's account of what transpired that evening without disclosing that they had a tape recording of Jason's shopping excursion at night. They asked him to recall the time he left the bar and arrived home. Jason lied once more, claiming that he got a text from his grandmother at 1 in the morning and went home to see how his son was doing. The detectives then told him that they had spoken to his grandmother, who denied any involvement in the night. Jason admitted to the detectives that night that he had gone home by himself to spend time with his son and that his grandmother had not gotten in touch with him. Jason repeated his claim that he left alone and came home, after telling another lie when asked who he left with. The detectives realized that Jason was putting himself in a situation he would never be able to get out of. They claimed to have surveillance footage that refuted all of his claims. Jason then acknowledged that he had left the bar with Dal for less, to buy her a bottle of Jägermeister and to eat for less. However, he claimed to have driven her back to the bar before leaving for home. He claimed it slipped his mind when detectives questioned him about why he had lied about a crucial detail, such as the fact that Dalene had left with Dalene. Dalene claims that he invited her to stay the night on his couch and she agreed. He acknowledged that he and Dalene had had intimate contact and that they shared a Jägermeister. After he explained it to Dalene became upset, said it shouldn't have happened, and sobbed as he went home. Jason related a news story about how they got into a fight early on Sunday morning while he was driving Dalene home. He picked up his grandmother on the corner close to his house and got into her car. She tried to get out of the car just before they arrived at Dalene's house. Dalene Karengrein was upset and yelled to be allowed to get out of the car for the duration of the 30 to 45-minute drive. She said she couldn't believe Jason had done this and called him a piece of garbage. Jason claims that the last time he saw Dalene, she got out of the car and fled when he pulled over. The interview ended when Jason insisted on having a lawyer. Gilley was not charged by the police because they did not have enough evidence. Gilley had no choice but to let him go. Jason went to the police station on August 22, 2011, after being released on August 18, 2011, to report that his wallet had been stolen or lost. Upon seeing him, detectives investigating Dalene's disappearance were taken aback. Jason was approached by Detective Robert Fain, who asked him to accompany him on a retracement of the path he took on the day Dalene vanished. Jason consented and led the detective to the spot where Dalene is said to have jumped out of the car and run away. When the detective questioned Jason about why he didn't try to apprehend her, Jason said that he had to return home because the car behind him was honking, so he got back on the freeway. Then Jason explained that he had been looking for Lean for 10 or 15 minutes, but he had to leave because his gas tank was nearly empty. To get gas, he drove to Stockton's Archie Road. The detective went to the gas station with no fresh leads. Luckily, security cameras were in place. There, at 10:46 a.m. on August 7, 2011, Jason pulled over at the gas station on Archie Road exit on Highway 99 in Stockton, according to surveillance footage. It had been 9.5 hours since he had last taken a video at the Dalene liquor store. Jason appeared to be acting normally at first, but the inconspicuous gesture caught our attention. Jason appears to be unclean. Jason's shirt and arm are covered in dirt. He seems to be shaking his shoulders at one point. This conduct seems very suspicious. Before leaving the gas station, Jason checks the passenger door before getting into his car and walking back to it. He opens the passenger door once more and slams it shut after 20 seconds. Dalene was the last person to use that door, he said. At last, he takes off in his car. Detectives have developed a new theory after seeing this footage. Their theory is that Dalene took Dalene to a field south of Stockton and, in a hurry, physically pulled her out of the car, causing the front passenger door to jam. Dalene thought that she was dead, but they told her that in order to arrest Jason. Dalene was still missing, and Jason was out and about interviewing representatives. The case then underwent a sea change on October 15, 2011, more than 2 months after Dalene's disappearance. A farmer made a tragic discovery in a field 20 miles outside of Stockton. According to court documents on the 15th of 2011, human remains, later identified as Dalene, were found in a cornfield approximately 64 feet from Lone Tree Road in the Escalating. That afternoon, senior criminalist Sarah Yoshida of the Department of Justice was sent to the crime scene. A skull, ribs, jaw, vertebrae, and bones from the feet and legs were among the many bones discovered by Yoshida. She also discovered a clump of hair and a human torso. Cases of 522 caliber cartridges were discovered just southeast of the location of the human remains, and a black bra was discovered between the remains and Lawn Road. Dr. Bennett Omalu, the medical examiner for San Joaquin County, arrived at the crime scene at approximately 9 p.m. that evening. He ordered an 18-inch excavation of the ground beneath the body as soon as he saw it. After securing the soil in a body bag and x-raying it, we discovered 222 caliber bullets in the excavated soil. An AUI was conducted on Dalene's remains by Dr. Omalu. He claimed that Dalene was shot in the cornfield where her remains were discovered, and that either the bullets passed through her body and lodged in the ground just beneath her, or they remained inside the body and fell out as it decomposed. In either case, there was a gunshot wound to the backhead. Based on the location of the gunshot wound and the fact that Dalene's fingernails, jewelry, and nails were tangled in her hair, Dr. Omalu believed that when Dalene was shot, she had her hands and fingers wrapped around her head. Omalu came to the conclusion that Dalene's death was caused by a gunshot wound to the head, with gunshot wounds to the trunk also playing a role. Additionally, he believed that her body's decomposition supported her death on August 7, 2011. In the murder of Dalene, investigators had a top suspect. Detectives also found that Jason had access to a Jennings 22.2 semi-automatic handgun that belonged to one of his relatives, according to court documents. The gun's involvement in Dalene's shooting was verified by ballistics testing. Jason Gilley was arrested by authorities when he was eventually taken into custody. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Dalene went to a bar to meet some friends, and investigators developed their theory about what happened the night she vanished. Among them was Jason Gilley. Dalene was convinced to come to Jason Gilley's house. On their way to Jason's house, they made a stop at a liquor store. This liquor store is where we last saw Dalene alive. Nothing seemed to be bothering her based on this footage, but after she and Jason left the store, things started to happen that ultimately resulted in her death. Dalene was naked when her body was discovered by investigators. Because of this, authorities concluded that she didn't want to have an intimate relationship with Jason, but he coerced her into doing so. That was the only plausible explanation. Authorities believe that Dalene told Jason that she would report it to the police, so he put her in his car, drove many miles past her home, and then turned into a field where he killed her. However, the body's extreme decomposition made it impossible to verify that theory. Jason Gilley was found guilty of Dalene's murder in November 2013 and given a life sentence without the possibility of release. He made an unsuccessful attempt to appeal the sentence. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. One gloomy autumn evening, Ayaz Kara vanished, leaving only a trail of unresolved questions and unsettling suspicions. His wife, Sevda, looked extremely shaken and his family was in shock. However, neighbors soon noticed something strange. A certain Dr. Levant was regularly seen at Sevda's house, and his interest in the Kara family appeared to be much more profound than one might anticipate from a typical doctor. It was the beginning of a somber tale that would soon come to light and was full of treachery, deceit, and ulterior motives. Ayaz Kara and Sevda, a married couple, appeared to be leading a stable life in 2015 in a small town in southwest Turkey. At the age of 37, Ayaz Kara operated a construction company that generated a consistent income. The house was run by 33-year-old Sevda. They had first met in college, where Sevda was pursuing a degree in literature and Ayaz Kara was studying engineering. With the exception of one major challenge, the inability to conceive, their lives were comparatively calm and devoid of major crises. This reality had turned into a very personal heartbreak. They made many attempts and sought advice from a variety of experts, but their dream of parenthood never came true. Their marriage was constantly strained as a result of this failure, leading to arguments and continuous disappointment. Despite the painful realization that their happiness was lacking children, Sevda and Ayaz Kara tried every medical treatment without success. They were both on the verge of emotional exhaustion as a result of the additional strain from their family members. They first learned about Dr. Levant during this trying period. Levant was known for being an accomplished doctor who focused on infertility problems. He was 42 years old and highly respected in the medical community for his knowledge and non-traditional methods of treatment. His approaches attracted patients who had given up on conventional treatments by fusing aspects of alternative therapies with conventional medical procedures. Despite its small size and location on the outskirts of town, his clinic was very popular with the locals. Sevda thought this might be their last chance when she heard about Levant from a friend. At first, Ayaz Kara wasn't convinced, but he decided to give it a try after seeing his wife's anguish. They turned to Dr. Levant for assistance. After carefully listening to their story and performing comprehensive examinations, the doctor presented a treatment plan that included both medication and lifestyle modification. After several months of treatment, Sevda finally found out she was expecting a child. For the couple, this news was nothing short of a miracle, and they were incredibly appreciative of Levant. But the doctor stayed active in Sevda's life, keeping an eye on her health and offering constant support. He was more than just a medical helper. He helped Sevda deal with the difficulties of her pregnancy by coming to their house on a regular basis. His visits became more frequent over time. Sevda and Levant's relationship gradually started to conflate the characteristics of a normal doctor-patient relationship. Ayaz Kara was devoted to his job and did everything in his power to provide his expanding family with a secure future. Levant, meanwhile, was there for Sevda when she most needed assistance. His visits became routine, and his presence in the house felt almost natural. Sevda had grown used to having him around, and what began as professional interactions gradually transformed into something more personal. Ayaz Kara first grew suspicious when he unexpectedly returned home one day and found Levant in their living room. The doctor explained that he had stopped by to check on Sevda's condition. Although the explanation made sense, a nagging feeling lingered in Ayaz Kara's mind. He soon began to notice that Levant's visits were becoming more frequent, and his wife's behavior grew more distant. Conversations between Ayaz Kara and Sevda became strained, and the initial joy of expecting their baby started to give way to an unsettling sense of anxiety. Sevda and Levant continued to meet. Their interactions became increasingly secretive, and their encounters often happened when Ayaz Kara was away at work. Levant visited under various pretexts, checking Sevda's health, bringing medications, or providing follow-up advice. Even during her pregnancy, Sevda and Levant managed to find moments of seclusion. The visits grew longer and more frequent, and Sevda made no effort to stop them, as their connection only deepened. Meanwhile, Ayaz Kara could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. He observed that his wife was hiding things from him, but he struggled to figure out how to address his suspicions. One afternoon, Ayaz Kara came home earlier than usual and once again found Levant there. The scene seemed ordinary enough, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Levant offered another plausible explanation for his visit, and Ayaz Kara had no choice but to accept it. Yet, the unease he felt was growing. He began paying closer attention to small details. How Sevda lingered in the kitchen when Levant was around. How she avoided answering his questions directly. The relationship between Ayaz Kara and Sevda grew colder, and Ayaz Kara felt trapped by unanswered questions and growing doubts. Levant, for his part, was well aware that the situation was becoming more precarious. He could see that Ayaz Kara was getting increasingly suspicious, yet Levant had no intention of backing down. Maybe he had reasons for remaining involved, and he knew more than Ayaz Kara could have imagined. He kept pushing boundaries, testing how far he could go before everything spiraled out of control. Ayaz Kara, on the other hand, became more consumed by his suspicions. He started watching his wife's every move, desperate to uncover the truth of what was unfolding in his own home. The tension within the family had reached a breaking point. Sevda and Levant continued to meet in secret, despite the escalating risks. Ayaz Kara could feel his family slipping through his fingers, but was at a complete loss as to how to stop it. Meanwhile, Levant showed no signs of backing down, even as Ayaz Kara's suspicions grew. He seemed determined to play out his dangerous game, not knowing where it might lead. As time passed, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. When Sevda's pregnancy became more noticeable, she and Levant finally stopped their clandestine encounters. The risk had become too great, and with Sevda's pregnancy now obvious, Levant ceased his visits under any pretext, and their connection abruptly came to a halt as if it had never happened. Yet this did not bring peace to Ayaz Kara and Sevda's home. The relationship between the couple became even more strained, consumed by suspicion and inner turmoil. Ayaz Kara tried to stay home as much as possible, searching for ways to reconnect with his wife. Despite his efforts, he couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had been irrevocably broken. Sevda, on the other hand, couldn't understand why Ayaz Kara had grown so distant and cold. She struggled to make sense of his change in behavior, as the tension between them only deepened. After another quiet dinner one evening, Ayaz Kara abruptly vanished. Since he always informed her if he would be late to work or had errands to run, Sevda realized he was gone from the house, which was very unusual. There was no note, no phone call this time. Sevda tried to control her anxiety, but worry started to bite her. After several days passed with no sign of Ayaz Kara, Sevda was forced to notify the authorities that he had vanished. Sevda was taken in for interrogation after the police began their investigation. The investigators were immediately alarmed by her actions. She frequently sidestepped direct questions about the status of her marriage and gave off the impression of being extremely nervous. She found it difficult to respond clearly when asked what could have caused her husband to disappear. She was clearly uncomfortable when asked about her affiliation with Levant. Although Sevda denied any connection to Levant other than medical consultations, her claims sounded tentative and unpersuasive. Investigators started looking into all of Ayaz Kara's connections, including his personal and professional relationships. They found that, in contrast to his usually rigorous work schedule, Ayaz Kara had been spending an unusual amount of time at home. The mysteries surrounding his disappearance are only becoming more complex in light of this detail. Even though Sevda insisted she didn't know anything, the investigators were still bothered by her nervousness and unpredictable behavior. While closely examining the surveillance footage from the cameras placed throughout the house, one of the investigators noticed a number of instances that didn't match Sevda's claims. He observed that Levant visited often, and that their interactions seemed far too familiar for a straightforward doctor-patient relationship. This finding encouraged further research into the nature of the relationship between Sevda and the Levant. Investigators soon suspected Sevda of being involved in her husband's disappearance, making her a prime suspect. She was still being called in by the police to be questioned about her interactions and activities in the days before Ayaz Kara vanished. Sevda's responses became increasingly erratic, and her anxious manner only served to heighten law enforcement suspicions. Levant became involved in the investigation as well, and investigators started looking for him to learn more about his role in this complicated case. It had been months since Ayaz Kara vanished. Despite a lot of work, the search produced very few tangible results. Investigators pursued a variety of avenues, including following Ayaz Kara's contacts, examining his business transactions, and going through his private correspondence, but each lead appeared to come to a standstill. Interviews with friends and coworkers revealed that none of them had any insightful information to share. Red flags were still raised by Sevda's peculiar behavior during interrogation. The suspicions about her were only heightened by her propensity to contradict herself and avoid direct responses. Life continued while the investigation stalled. A baby boy was born to Sevda. There was no celebration, despite the fact that the delivery went well and the child was healthy. The police and the community continued to keep a close eye on Sevda, and the baby's father was still missing. Neighbors whispered about what had happened, and rumors spread like wildfire throughout the small town. Sevda was frequently spotted with her baby, but there were always signs of worry and stress on her face. In an attempt to avoid attention, she maintained a low profile, but her actions only fueled further rumors. Soon after, neighbors noticed that Dr. Levant, who had previously only come to Sevda's house for medical visits, was now frequently there. It soon became apparent that he had essentially moved in after he was spotted spending the night there. The townspeople were outraged by this. Such behavior did not go unnoticed in a small community where everyone knew one another. The relationship between Sevda and Levant was suspected to have begun long before Ayaz Kara vanished. Rumors spread, and before long everyone knew that Levant was her lover and not just a friend who helped her through a tough moment. Sevda's home came under more and more critical scrutiny. Her behavior was the subject of gossip from neighbors, who conjectured that she and her new friend may have been complicit in the disappearance of Ayaz Kara. Some even said they had witnessed Levant visiting Sevda often while she was pregnant, and that his visits had appeared much too frequent for a mere doctor. However, Levant continued to live openly in Sevda's house, seemingly unaffected by the circulating rumors. He took on many of the duties of a family man, including helping to care for the infant. He was regularly observed by neighbors doing household repairs, grocery shopping, and trash collection. He pretended to be the legitimate head of the household, which only served to increase the indignation in the town. When Levant and Sevda were seen together at the neighborhood market shopping for things for the baby, the disapproval peaked. They were seen holding hands, which sparked a wave of condemnation. Levant's increasingly noticeable presence at Sevda's house became a crucial piece of the puzzle as the police investigation into Ayaz Kara's disappearance continued. Investigators started closely observing the property, following Levant and Sevda's every step and every visit. Although there was growing suspicion that they were somehow connected to Ayaz Kara's unexplained disappearance, authorities were unable to establish a direct connection that would link them to the case in the absence of any hard evidence. Sevda made an effort to keep things somewhat normal, but it was almost impossible. Her residence was continuously monitored by both the police and nosy neighbors. Every action she took was closely watched, and rumors about her were constantly spreading. She could not avoid the judgment. Women who once greeted her warmly and engaged in conversation about daily life now completely avoided her when she took her infant for walks. Families that had previously been friendly with her started to distance themselves from her after some even made mean comments, such as, "Her husband's barely gone, and she's already found his replacement." Levant, on the other hand, avoided any conflicts. He carried on with his life as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. He never bothered to defend himself, he never engaged with the neighbors, and he ignored the whispers. The situation became even more tense because of his disregard for public opinion. His assurance was evident, and Sevda found herself depending on him more and more as she drew courage from his unwavering poise. Meanwhile, the police kept reviewing the home security footage taken prior to Ayaz Kara's disappearance. They found growing evidence that Levant had seen Sevda far more often than a normal physician would have. This made Levant a prime suspect, especially since he was now residing in the missing man's house. Investigators started getting the paperwork ready so they could call Levant in for formal interrogation. Sevda insisted that Levant stay, but Levant began to consider leaving town for a while to avoid attracting any more attention. Not with the intense and inevitable looks of suspicion and condemnation from those around her. She could no longer handle it all alone. There was a knock on the door one evening. The police were involved. To answer some questions, they invited Levant to come down to the station. He had been aware that this day would eventually arrive. He composed himself and assured Sevda that he would return shortly before stepping out to meet the officers. With 1,000 concerns racing through her head, she watched as the police car drove off. She was aware that life would never be the same and that they would be constantly monitored. Levant tried to remain calm at the police station. The detectives questioned him about his frequent visits to Sevda, his relationship with Ayaz Kara, and why he was now residing in her home. According to Levant, he was merely a medical professional who had been supporting Sevda during a challenging pregnancy and the months that followed. Although he denied any involvement in the disappearance of Ayaz Kara, his answers did not satisfy the investigators. They persisted, looking for contradictions in his account. Meanwhile, fresh rumors started to spread around town. There were rumors that Levant might even be arrested and that the police were finally taking the case seriously. Some neighbors said that Sevda's actions had long struck them as strange, and that they had always suspected something was wrong. The community's judgment became more obvious. People shunned Sevda, and those who had previously supported her now abandoned her. After being questioned for several hours, Levant went home. He attempted to hide the fact that he was tired. At the door, Sevda greeted him with a strained and pale face. Even though she didn't ask any questions, it was clear that she was afraid. Levant realized that the situation was more serious than they had anticipated and that they were now in actual danger. Every action they took would be closely watched by the police, who obviously weren't going to let them off the hook. The tension only increased in the weeks that followed. Levant made an effort to continue as though nothing had changed, but the community's and the authorities' pressure was getting to be too much. Sevda avoided interacting with neighbors and rarely left the house. She was aware that their lives had devolved into a never-ending anticipation of catastrophe. They no longer felt safe, and their fear only grew with each new encounter with the police. Levant and Sevda came to the conclusion that there was no use in continuing to deny their relationship after weeks of incessant interrogation. Their lives had become intolerable due to the police pressure, the critical looks from their neighbors, and the never-ending barrage of suspicions. They made the decision to come clean. They maintained that they had nothing to do with Ayaz Kara's disappearance, despite the fact that they were living together and had become romantically involved. They freely admitted during a follow-up interrogation that they were now a couple, and that Levant had moved in with Sevda to assist with babysitting. They denied any involvement in Ayaz Kara's disappearance and stated that their feelings for one another had become too intense to ignore. They also asserted that their relationship had only started after Ayaz Kara disappeared. Their admission was met with suspicion by the police. Though there was no basis for criminal charges connecting the two to Ayaz Kara's disappearance, investigators were still certain that they were concealing something. However, the case became even more tense after Sevda and Levant came clean about their romantic relationship. Every action they took was now closely monitored as the investigation grew more intense. Sevda and Levant were all too aware that their life together had devolved into a never-ending nightmare, with new questions and suspicions emerging every day. Ayaz Kara's family, meanwhile, refused to wait around. Mehmet, his younger brother, and his parents decided to take matters into their own hands and started their own investigation. They were convinced that Ayaz Kara couldn't have vanished without foul play, and that Sevda and Levant knew more than they were confessing. Especially Mehmet was unrelenting. He spent hours interviewing neighbors, compiling data and examining it to find any possible leads. He clung to the hope that Sevda and Levant were somehow involved in his brother's disappearance and was determined to find out the truth. One day, Mehmet got a tip from a neighbor who said that a suspicious van had been seen close to the house the night Ayaz Kara vanished. No one had given it much attention at first, but now that detail seemed important. Mehmet started to inquire, and a number of neighbors attested to seeing the van. There were people inside the house where it had been parked. The timing coincided with the abrupt disappearance of Ayaz Kara, but no one knew who they were. Mehmet followed up on every lead pertaining to the van and eventually located a source who could provide a more thorough account. It was a white van that was old and unmarked. The witness also reported seeing individuals that evening loading heavy-looking objects or big bags into the van. For Mehmet, this realization felt like a breakthrough. After compiling everything he had learned, He gave it to the police. The tip was taken seriously by the authorities, who started investigating. The investigation took a crucial turn when they learned that a van that fit that description had previously been reported for suspicious activity in the neighborhood. The investigation was starting to put the pieces of the information they had collected together. The police began looking through town-wide security cameras that might have recorded the van's movement. They soon discovered video from one of the cameras, which showed a white van traveling late at night along a road close to the residences of Ayaz Kara and Sevda. This video turned into an important piece of evidence that might help explain Ayaz Kara's disappearance. The authorities' efforts to find the owner of the van were soon successful. They found that a man named Emre, who had previously been a driver for Levant's clinic, was the van's registered owner and had a connection to Levant. This discovery changed the course of the inquiry. They quickly brought Emre in for interrogation. He initially vehemently denied any wrongdoing, but when pressure mounted, his story started to fall apart. Detectives narrowed their line of inquiry by pressing him further after noticing discrepancies in his account. After a while, Emre broke down and acknowledged that he had helped Levant that evening. He said he had only been instructed to assist with moving some things and had not been fully informed of the situation. He claimed that because he assumed he was helping his boss with a personal issue, he didn't ask questions. Emre denied any direct involvement in the disappearance of Ayaz Kara and maintained that he had no idea what was in the bags he had assisted in transporting, but his admission only made Levant and Sevda seem more suspicious. The police were aware that they needed to move quickly. They obtained arrest warrants for Sevda and Levant so they could be questioned further, as well as a search warrant for their residence. Law enforcement showed up at Sevda and Levant's house late at night when it was quiet. A startled Sevda answered the door when they knocked, utterly unprepared for what was about to happen. She was shown the search warrant by the officers. As the police started their search, Levant was immediately taken into custody, handcuffed before he could speak, and arrested. The noise alerted the neighbors, who gathered outside the house. They whispered and murmured, trying to figure out what was going on. It appeared that the long-held suspicions of many that something was wrong were now validated. In search of any clues linking Sevda and Levant to the disappearance of Ayaz Kara, the officers searched the house. Hours passed during the search, but no concrete proof was discovered right away. One of the officers kept a close eye on Sevda as she sat in the living room. Her eyes were filled with fear, and she appeared confused. She was aware that things had gotten really bad, and that nothing would ever be the same. After Levant was brought to the station, Sevda realized he would now have to answer a flurry of questions. Levant came to the conclusion that lying was pointless after he was arrested. He eventually admitted to everything that had transpired during the subsequent interrogation while seated in the police station. The investigation took an unexpected turn with his admission. He explained how the whole plan had come to pass, how he and Sevda had intended to get rid of Ayaz Kara, and how they hoped to start a new life together. The puzzle pieces fit together with every word, and the reality of what had happened was eventually exposed. Levant acknowledged that learning that Ayaz Kara couldn't conceive was the catalyst for everything. When doctors confirmed this, Sevda was devastated, but Levant saw an opening. He started providing Sevda with emotional support and positioned himself as the answer to her problems. They developed a romantic relationship over time. Sevda told Levant she no longer wanted to live with Ayaz Kara after she became pregnant with his child. Levant agreed to assist in getting rid of her husband because he was obsessed with Sevda and wanted to start a new life with her. Everything had been meticulously planned for the night Ayaz Kara vanished. Levant had made arrangements for Emre, his old driver, to help with the ride. They had picked a night when Ayaz Kara was returning home later than normal, and the van was parked close by. They moved quickly after Levant entered the house, pretending to check on Sevda. Levant hit Ayaz Kara in the head while he was in the living room, knocking him out. Ayaz Kara was never given the opportunity to comprehend the situation. Then Emre arrived at the house, and he and Levant loaded the body of Ayaz Kara into the van. Sevda watched over them in the meantime, making sure no one saw what they were doing. To conceal Ayaz Kara's body and prevent any evidence from being discovered, they wrapped it in big plastic bags. Levant and Sevda had already prepared a shallow grave in an abandoned area on the outskirts of town, which they drove to. There, they buried Ayaz Kara's body in a secluded wooded area as part of their disposal. Neighbors had seen the bags being loaded into the van, and they were used to hide any evidence and make sure the body was not in direct contact with the bags. They did it to be together, Levant clarified. Sevda had been extremely dissatisfied with her marriage, and he would stop at nothing to help her and their unborn child. He believed that there was no other way to get rid of Ayaz Kara. He and Sevda both wished that no one would ever connect them to the crime, and that Ayaz Kara's disappearance would go unsolved. The police started getting ready to arrest Sevda as soon as they heard Levin's confession. Levin appeared resigned, realizing that the instant they made the decision to commit the crime, their lives were over. Knowing that there was no defense for what they had done, he made no effort to defend himself. After he confessed, Sevda was arrested after the police searched her house once more. The neighbors gathered outside to watch the events as Sevda was arrested just outside her home. Sevda couldn't handle the pressure and ended up confessing as well when she found herself at the police station. She talked about how she had become increasingly resentful of Ayaz Kara and how their relationship had soured after she found out he couldn't conceive. She disclosed that her child was actually Levant's, and she acknowledged that she wanted to start over with him. Sevda explained how they had meticulously planned to kill Ayaz Kara, narrating how Levant offered several ideas to get rid of her husband before they ultimately agreed on a scheme that included kidnapping and a last violent act. Equipped with this new knowledge, the police searched the forest Levant had pointed out for Ayaz Kara's body. They discovered a grave after searching the woods for hours. Despite the fact that Ayaz Kara's remains were badly decomposed, the discovery offered sufficient proof to establish his demise and formally establish the case against Sevda and Levant. According to the results of a forensic investigation, Levant struck Ayaz Kara during the assault, causing a fatal head injury. Ayaz Kara's body was given back to his family for burial after the autopsy was finished. The funeral was a heartbreaking and solemn event. The younger brother and parents of Ayaz Kara were unable to contain their tears. They had the small comfort of being able to bury their brother and son, even though they knew that Sevda and Levant were to blame for his demise. There was a sense of collective shock and grief in the air as many townspeople came to pay their respects. People found it difficult to understand how two people they had known could have committed such an unimaginable crime, and how such a horrible act could occur in their peaceful community. The public and media took a keen interest in Sevda and Levant's trial. Levant acknowledged his guilt in court, saying he had done it because he loved Sevda and wanted to give her and her child a better life. Sevda acknowledged her role as well, but she made an effort to present herself as a victim of her circumstances by saying she was coerced into following the plan. But the court rejected her justification. Levant and Sevda were both given life sentences without the chance of release. Ayaz Kara's parents were granted custody of the infant. Ayaz Kara's parents decided to raise the boy as their grandson, despite the fact that he was Levin's biological son. Even though they knew he wasn't their biological grandchild, they couldn't bear the idea of leaving him. Despite the heartbreaking reality of his origins, they promised to provide the child with a loving and secure future because he was their only remaining link to Ayaz Kara. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. After meeting in high school, Lloyd and Michelle got married in 1991, not long after they graduated. After getting married and attending college, they soon began a family. Prior to landing a job as an engineer in a factory, Lloyd Neurotter served as a professor of exact sciences at a college after earning his engineering degree in the mid-1990s. Michelle was a professor of English and also held a college degree. Their first daughter was born at about the same time. Two more daughters were later born to Michelle. In the 1990s, as their lives were changing significantly, they moved to a large house in the charming town of Corning, New York. The two seemed happy. In addition to working hard, Lloyd spent a lot of time with his family, particularly his three daughters. Michelle was cheerful and energetic, keeping occupied with housework and the children. She homeschooled the kids in addition to being a teacher. Many of their friends looked up to them as an example of the perfect family. But Lloyd's actions changed significantly over time. He changed from being a devoted husband and father to a despot who aimed to rule the whole household. He insisted on complete obedience and following the guidelines he established. In order to get his wife and kids to comply with his wishes, Lloyd was willing to use force if needed. Relationships within the family consequently quickly deteriorated. The only daughter with whom Lloyd had a positive relationship was Carrie, the middle daughter. She was different from her sisters in that she was devoted to her father. By taking her to events like the ballet, doing her hair and makeup, and giving her extra attention, Lloyd showed her how much he valued her loyalty. He brutally imposed order and control over the rest of the family, though, and showed them no such kindness. Carrie was compassionate and kind as a child. She was involved in many humanitarian endeavors and especially loved working with the homeless. Up until 2008, when America went through a serious financial crisis, the family was able to get along. Millions of Americans experienced financial and employment difficulties during this period. After losing his job, Lloyd started looking for another one right away, but his efforts proved fruitless. Michelle began looking for work as well, but she found it difficult to juggle her search with taking care of their daughters and the house. Lloyd eventually secured a reputable position in New Jersey. The fact that her husband had at last found work pleased Michelle. She continued to take care of the kids while finding part-time employment in Corning, her hometown. Michelle found it more and more challenging to run the family alone after Lloyd moved to New Jersey on his own. When Lloyd demanded a divorce a few months later, things took an odd turn. The decision was unexpected because there were no urgent grounds for separation. No serious arguments between the couple were known to friends or acquaintances. Michelle found herself in a challenging situation after Lloyd's decision caught her and the kids completely off guard. She had been a great wife and mother, but she was in a difficult situation because of her husband's behavior. According to Lloyd, he no longer wanted to get back together with Michelle because they had become estranged during their separation. After landing a job teaching English at a college, Michelle started raising her kids by herself. The divorce lasted for a number of years. After she and her kids relocated to a new residence in the same city, Michelle's life became a little simpler. By that time, her daughters were old enough to help out around the house, giving Michelle more time to concentrate on her work. She was establishing herself professionally and earning a good living. She still had to deal with Lloyd, though, who wanted sole custody of their kids. Additionally, the two were embroiled in a savage argument about child support. Lloyd repeatedly tried to defame Michelle in court to obtain full custody during the protracted divorce process, which lasted more than 5 years. Michelle retaliated in spite of the challenges, defending herself and filing counterclaims against her ex-husband. Their family's ongoing legal troubles started to come up in court and among their friends. Master manipulator Lloyd was. In the years after 2010, the middle child, Carrie, moved in with her father. She loved and missed her father very much, so she thought it was her decision. The judge, however, disagreed with Carrie's decision and supported the other children's decision to remain with their mother throughout the trial. To pick up the youngest daughter for swim practice, a family friend drove to Michelle's house on August 28, 2017. He caught a glimpse of Michelle through the living room window, but she was standing strangely close to the stairs. He exited the vehicle and walked toward the house, but when he knocked on the door, nobody answered. The dog was barking non-stop, and Michelle was standing where she was. He went in and stepped closer, as if the door were open. He was horrified to see that Michelle was hanging from the railing rather than standing. Her hand was cold and stiff when he felt for a pulse. He reported that it looked like Michelle had killed herself, and promptly dialed 911. Emergency workers confirmed that Michelle, 46, could not be saved when they arrived. She was dead already. When police searched the house, they discovered that Michelle and her 14-year-old daughter were the only occupants. The oldest daughter, Carrie, had gone off to college and was living with her father. Initially, it appeared that Michelle had committed suicide, but as police looked into it more, they found a number of irregularities. It appears that the scene was staged because Michelle had facial marks that were incompatible with suicide, and there was no sign of the youngest daughter, who was supposed to be at home. In addition to considering the possibility of kidnapping, police started looking into the possibility of murder. Michelle's husband and daughters were contacted by detectives. It turned out that Carrie, who was the first to reply, was accompanied by her younger sister. Since the younger sister had not missed her swim lesson and had no justification for being with her father and sister, the police thought this was suspicious. When asked, Carrie disclosed that she had gone to spend the night with her mother. She said that because Lloyd was attempting to take away her youngest daughter and the court appeared to be siding with him, Michele had been upset and crying all night. Carrie claimed that just before the family friend found Michele's body, she and her sister left their mother's house. She clarified that she was afraid to leave her with Michele, who had been acting strangely and inappropriately all day, so she brought her younger sister along. But this account didn't seem likely. Michele's friends and acquaintances gave the police a different account. 2 days prior to her passing, Michele had gone back to court for a custody hearing concerning her youngest daughter, according to one friend. Despite being involved in a contentious custody dispute, Lloyd did not show up for the final hearing. It was very unusual for him to not even answer or call his cell phone. Lloyd's absence shocked everyone involved in the process. However, Michele felt that the custody dispute had been settled in her favor, and she was truly happy. She was so sure that she would now have full custody of her daughter that she even celebrated with her lawyer. Her mother suspected Lloyd of being involved in Michele's death and promptly reported it to the police. Michele's decision to commit suicide and leave her children in the care of strangers was unthinkable to her. Given the contentious nature of their divorce and Lloyd's lengthy history of trying to deny Michele parental rights, he was made the main suspect. At first, it was hard to get in touch with Lloyd. He helped Carrie settle in before she started college, and she said he was with her when the murder occurred. In addition, Lloyd was lodging at a hotel in Rochester, which is roughly 160 kilometers away from Corning. After that, he made the roughly 4,000-kilometer journey to California for a job interview. Lloyd didn't seem very upset when investigators finally got to him and told him about Michele's passing. He just took a plane to Corning and went directly to the courthouse to stop paying alimony, which seemed very suspicious in the situation. He confirmed Carrie's claims at the police station after the hearing, saying he had been assisting her with her move and was in a different city when Michele died. Lloyd never followed through on his promise to take a polygraph test. Detectives did not have enough evidence to charge Lloyd despite his evasive behavior, but as their suspicions grew, they started looking into his whereabouts. Through the examination of CCTV footage and cell phone records, they found inconsistencies in Lloyd's alibi. He seemed to have occasionally forgotten his cell phone, perhaps to conceal his whereabouts. According to the video, the younger sister was with Lloyd and Carrie when they left the Rochester hotel the night of the murder, and did not return until the following morning. This ran counter to Lloyd's assertions. A closer look showed that Lloyd was in serious financial trouble. He was in dire need of money and owed more than $100,000 on his credit cards. He had purchased a more than $200,000 life insurance policy on Michele, which would pay out to him after she passed away. Investigators' suspicions were raised by this discovery, and they started actively looking for Lloyd as a suspect. Investigating further, investigators discovered that Carrie continued to show up at crucial points in the case. They made the decision to listen in on Lloyd and Carrie's phone conversations, which showed that they were concealing something. Carrie was frequently rudely interrupted by Lloyd, who seemed to sense that they were being watched. He stressed during these calls that they should not discuss certain topics over the phone, and suggested that they speak face-to-face instead. The police believed they were headed in the right direction. The medical examiner's report added credence to the murder theory. Michele had been attacked from behind and strangled, as evidenced by the marks on her chin and the bruises around her eyes. It was almost impossible for her to resist the killer's use of a rope to squeeze her throat. To make the scene appear to be a suicide, it had been sloppily staged. Armed with this evidence, investigators once again focused on Carrie. Detectives confronted her after her college classes, despite her repeated refusals to come to the police station for interrogation. Carrie initially denied any involvement, but after being coerced, she acknowledged that she and Lloyd had spent the morning of the murder at her mother's house. She said that after an argument between her parents, Lloyd and Michele went upstairs, after which Michele fell silent. But when the investigators dug deeper, Carrie told a far more sinister tale. While making sure her younger sister didn't see the crime, Carrie admitted that Lloyd had killed Michele. She had actually been involved in the murder. She clarified that Lloyd had been outlining how to set up the scene to appear as though it was a suicide, a week prior to the incident. Although she was unable to provide a clear explanation, Carrie's startling admission made it clear that she had publicly detested her mother. She acknowledged that her feelings had been impacted by her father's continual disparaging remarks about Michelle. Because of Lloyd's manipulation, Carrie had turned against her mother and was prepared to help him commit the crime. Police moved to arrest Lloyd, and Carrie was taken into custody as an accomplice, but there was no sign of him. When police finally caught up with him in Princeton, he threatened to jump from a fifth-story parking garage railing. Officers were able to subdue and arrest Lloyd Neureuther, who was 45 at the time, after 2 hours of negotiating. Carrie and Lloyd were both charged with Michelle's murder. Lloyd was charged with tampering with evidence, conspiracy to commit murder, and first-degree murder. He strongly refuted the accusations, saying he was at a hotel when the murder took place. On the night of the murder, however, security footage showed him leaving the hotel with Carrie and coming back the following morning with her younger sister. Furthermore, GPS data indicated that Lloyd was close to Michelle's residence at the time of the crime, and his DNA was discovered on her pajamas. Carrie was accused of conspiracy to commit murder, concealing evidence, and second-degree murder. She entered a guilty plea and consented to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence, as she faced the prospect of a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. It was anticipated that she would testify against her father. The prosecution emphasized the case's unsettling aspects throughout the trial. Carrie had helped her father plan and carry out the murder, so she had been a willing participant in the crime. Despite having numerous chances to prevent the crime, she assisted Lloyd in killing her mother. There was proof that Carrie and Lloyd had gone to Michelle's house early in the morning. Unaware of their intentions, Michelle opened the door out of trust. Carrie made sure her younger sister didn't wake up and find out what was going on, while Lloyd attacked her from behind and strangled her with a rope. The younger sister was not aware of the tragedy because they woke her up after the murder and fled through the back door. More than 26 folders of evidence were presented by the prosecution, showing how Lloyd had tricked Carrie into detesting her mother. He had disparaged Michelle on numerous occasions over the years, severing Carrie's connection with her mother and presenting her in a negative light. Carrie's hatred and willingness to commit the crime were fostered by Lloyd's persuasion that Michelle posed a threat to her and her siblings. The prosecution claims that Lloyd's desire to avoid sharing custody of his youngest daughter and financial gain were the driving forces behind the murder. Lloyd and Carrie thought they could claim Michelle's death as a suicide and use the money from the life insurance policy to live comfortably. Carrie testified that because of his crippling debt, which included $6,000 in monthly child support payments, her father had threatened to kill him or commit suicide unless they killed Michelle. Carrie tragically decided to help her father because she was influenced by him. In the end, Lloyd entered a guilty plea to charges of murder and forcing his daughter to assist him. He tried to defend his actions, though, by saying that he killed Michelle to keep the kids safe from her, but no one took him seriously. The court acknowledged that Carrie had suffered from her father's moral abuse and manipulation. Lloyd was given a life sentence without the possibility of release after being found guilty of first-degree murder and other offenses. Supported by her maternal grandmother, Carrie received a prison sentence ranging from 1 to 3 years for her role in concealing evidence. On January 16, 2020, she was released early after completing a portion of her sentence. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On May 3, 2019, 17-year-old Ellie Gould decided to skip her regular class and spend the day studying alone. Nobody knew that there was a terrifying secret hidden behind her closed door. Her father expected her typical chirpy greeting when he got home, but instead he found an eerie silence. The kitchen had devolved into a nightmare scene. Ellie Gould, a popular and intelligent sixth-form student, should have turned 18 the week before. However, she was killed in her own house in May. Ellie was lying there, a motionless figure in a pool of blood, a knife by her arms, stab wounds at her throat, not the lively girl her father had known. Her eyes, which had once been determined mirrors, gazed straight ahead. There were more questions in the air. Why would a young girl who followed her dreams, Ellie, commit suicide? However, there was more to this tale than first appeared. Before Ellie said her final goodbyes, rumors of another eerie presence in the house began to circulate after a silver Ford Fiesta was spotted close to her residence. Who was this invisible person? Were they complicit in the murder of Ellie? The crucial question still stood. Was this a horrific murder or an act of self-harm? The small, serene town of Dalene, Wiltshire, is situated in southwest England and is encircled by picturesque hills. The River Marden flows through its banks, surrounded by willow trees, and the air is thick with the scent of freshly cut grass. Stone cottages with window boxes in bloom line the cobbled streets. A weekly market with lively exchanges takes place in the town square, which is shaded by old oak trees. Ellie flourished in this calm environment, surrounded by the recognizable sounds of distant trains and church bells. Dalene was more than just a lovely location. It was a part of Ellie's journey, influencing her aspirations and objectives with its understated charm. Carol and Matthew Gould, both in their late 40s, welcomed Ellie into the world on February 6, 2002. She went into her A-levels as a Year 12 student at Hardenhoosh School with a strong sense of ambition. Ellie, however, was more than just studying and tests. Riding her favorite horse in the open fields brought her peace. She was naturally skilled at it, and even had aspirations of becoming a member of the mounted police. In addition to awards and trophies, Ellie played a crucial role in her family's life. Ellie was regarded by her contemporaries as a reliable friend who would listen to your darkest secrets and make you laugh until your sides ached. Ellie got along well with her cousins as well as her friends. Jess Vine, 17, was one of her closest cousins. Like sisters, they couldn't be separated. When someone said, "It was almost like we had twins in the family," Ellie desired to study psychology as well. Understanding the intricacies of the human mind, the positive, negative, and intriguing gray areas in between, was made possible by her A-levels. She wished to improve the world by assisting people in discovering their inner motivations. But Ellie's life took a surprising turn. No one could have imagined how brutally she was removed. Ellie Gould decided to study at home for her A-levels on May 3, 2019, rather than attending class. This day, however, was different. Everything changed when her father, Matthew Gould, returned from his job. There was a silence that persisted in the house indefinitely, replacing the usual routine and laughter. In a state of shock, Ellie's father, Matthew, called for an ambulance in a panic, unsure of what to do or how to react to what he had just seen. He then contacted Ellie's mother, Carol. His once bright daughter was now lying on the floor, her laugh gone, her beautiful face scarred, her eyes open and emotionless. Ellie had been lying dead in her kitchen for at least 4 hours, according to the Wiltshire police investigation. Unbelievably, she had 13 separate neck stab wounds and displayed symptoms of strangulation. Even the best surgeons or first aid would not have been able to save her due to the violent and upsetting nature of the stabbing. There was nothing to be done about the terrible and tragic circumstances. The police soon came to the conclusion that Ellie couldn't have done this to herself, and that there was little possibility that a stranger was to blame. They assumed it wasn't an outsider because nothing in the house was disturbed. The evidence indicated that it wasn't an outsider, which left the police perplexed. They began looking into more intimate circles, such as Ellie's friends, family, or acquaintances. This case was made even more complex by the fact that the motive was still unknown. Still in disbelief, her parents first thought that Ellie might have hurt herself unintentionally or fallen off a chair, but her father, Matthew, stopped and rethought the whole thing. Maybe he had a feeling something was wrong, or that there might be more to it than first appeared. When a neighbor gave a vital lead, the breakthrough occurred. Earlier that day, they had noticed a slender, unnamed male guest at Ellie's house. The police investigation was centered on this description, even though they were unable to see the person's face. The case took a major turn when the search for this enigmatic young man began. Detective Jim Taylor, the investigator, and his team acted quickly to interview all of Ellie's friends after learning of this lead. They began with Ellie Gould's friend and classmate, 17-year-old Ellie Welling. On May 3, 2019, the day of Ellie Gould's untimely death, Ellie Welling was scheduled to pick her up. The police reached a dead end after speaking with Ellie's friends, but they were distracted when they noticed a strange car driving toward Ellie's house. Shortly after Ellie's death, this car appeared on surveillance footage and was out of place in the neighborhood. The police needed Ellie's parents to identify any suspected friends in order to advance the investigation. However, Ellie's parents were unable to immediately come up with a friend because they knew all of her friends. It clicked for Ellie's parents when the police asked directly if Ellie was in a romantic relationship. Thomas Griffiths, age 18, was brought up. An 18-year-old A-level student named Thomas Griffiths played rugby for the first team and was a prefect at Hardenhush School in Chippenham, Wiltshire. He was raised in a decent household and put in a lot of effort to earn the chance at a promising future. Ellie had a major crush on him and had known him since 7th grade, so it's safe to say that she was thrilled when they started dating. Thomas became Ellie's first boyfriend when they formally began dating in January 2019, and their relationship went well. Since Ellie's parents knew everything about her life, she naturally told her mother about Griffiths. Although they hoped she would put her studies ahead of boys, her parents were aware of the brittleness of adolescent love and wanted to steer clear of it. They agreed to let her date even though they preferred that she concentrate on her studies. To get to know Thomas better, they invited him over for dinner and insisted on meeting him. Ellie's parents watched Thomas intently one evening while they were eating dinner in the kitchen, attempting to gauge his personality. He was quite quiet and appeared introverted, but there were no overt warning signs. They believed it was most likely because he was still a young boy and was nervous about meeting Ellie's family. Ellie's parents were supportive and understanding, and they were eager to give her space because they knew she was a smart and self-sufficient child. But they watched Thomas and silently pondered why Ellie had picked someone who didn't seem to be a good fit for her. They were certain that Ellie and Thomas couldn't be together, but they didn't say anything because they respected Ellie's opinion. They made the decision to give Thomas a chance in the hopes that Ellie would be happy. On February 6, 2019, Thomas even attended Ellie's 17th birthday celebration in their own kitchen. In that instance, her parents showed him their love and acceptance by extending a warm welcome into their house. Ellie and Thomas's relationship didn't last long during its honeymoon period. After 3 months, fissures appeared. After being blown away at first, Ellie felt that Thomas's incessant need for her was suffocating her independence. The initial excitement turned into a suffocating clinginess as he yearned for her presence all the time. She received grumpy disapproval whenever she tried to prioritize her A-levels or make friends. Ellie's need for room and development was in stark contrast to the future Thomas envisioned, which was laced with talk of marriage. Their relationship goals were headed in opposite directions and would eventually collide. Feeling stuck in a commitment she wasn't prepared for, Ellie longed for independence and the opportunity to be herself. The once ideal romance had devolved into a battle to uphold her individuality while juggling expectations. She wanted to concentrate on her studies, particularly her impending tests, and felt that she wasn't prepared for a committed relationship. Ellie told her mother she wanted to break up with Thomas in early May 2019. Her mother, not surprised by the news, asked if Ellie needed to talk or if there was a particular reason. Ellie told her mother that she just wanted to remain single for a while and that nothing had happened. She assured her mother that everything was under control and that she shouldn't worry. Ellie later went to her room and texted Thomas to end their relationship. Thomas insisted on denying the split and declared his love and compatibility with her. However, Ellie remained steadfast in her choice, telling friends about their split on May 2, 2019. She hoped they could still be friends, even though she knew Thomas might be upset. When police found Ellie in their kitchen the next day, there were questions about whether Thomas, an A-level student, could possibly be capable of such a thing. Since she didn't have classes until the afternoon on May 2, 2019, Ellie asked her parents if she could spend the following morning at home. Before going to school in the afternoon for her history class, she intended to prepare for her tests. She made arrangements for a friend, Ellie Welling, to come get her at 12 p.m. on May 3, 2019, the following morning, to attend school together. Griffiths and Ellie were both sixth formers at Hardenhush School in Chippenham on the day that Griffiths' mother dropped him off. Thomas walked into the school cafeteria and asked Ellie's friends where she was. He had been looking for her since the morning, wanting to talk about their breakup the night before. He made the snap decision to leave as soon as he found out that Ellie wasn't in school. Thomas pretended to be ill and told a teacher so before heading to the local bus stop. He quickly changed into a different pair of sneakers and a black hoodie as he made his way home, but just as he was about to leave, his mother came home without warning. In a panic, he hurried to hide in a cupboard until she was gone. After his mother left and he was left alone, Thomas grabbed the extra car keys and made the 10-minute drive to Ellie's house. He wanted to speak with her, so he knocked on her front door when he arrived. When Thomas realized Ellie was serious about ending their relationship, they reportedly got into a heated argument in the kitchen. He began choking Ellie in the midst of the argument. Thomas continued to fight despite her valiant attempts to defend herself, and Ellie fainted. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen and stabbed Ellie 13 times in the neck. She was unable to defend herself, but he washed the knife to get his fingerprints off it when he noticed she had stopped moving. In order to make it appear as though Ellie had caused her own harm, he then set up the scene. Once he had cleaned up the scene, he pretended to be Ellie and texted a friend using her phone. He took this action to make sure Ellie's body wasn't discovered until much later in the day. Ellie unintentionally scratched Thomas's face and neck while defending herself. Upon noticing these marks, Thomas devised a scheme to conceal his actions. In a group chat, he expressed to his friends how devastated he was by the breakup and even claimed that he was intentionally harming himself. He then suggested that they meet up to discuss their relationship while sending messages to Ellie's phone, as though he was not aware of anything out of the ordinary. To ask Thomas about Ellie, the police visited his home. His neck, which had new scratches from Ellie's brutal murder of him, caught their attention right away. The police were aware that there was more to the story, even though Thomas denied any involvement in Ellie's murder. Investigators looked at the family's Wi-Fi router settings and found that shortly after Thomas got home from school on May 3, his phone disconnected from the home network. It didn't reconnect until after 12 p.m. after being offline for several hours. Suspecting that this period coincided with Ellie's murder, they examined surveillance footage surrounding Ellie's home to learn more. A silver Ford Fiesta was seen leaving Ellie's neighborhood at 11:56 a.m. on CCTV footage from a passing bus. The police were able to identify the Griffiths family because the car's registration number was visible. Thomas was clearly implicated as the driver because no other family members were present at the time. Thomas steadfastly denied any involvement in Ellie's murder or presence at the crime scene, in spite of this evidence. Thomas's phone connected to the home network after 12 p.m., but disconnected for an 18-minute period, police found after closely examining the family's Wi-Fi router. When the police focused on the area around them, they noticed a wooded area. They walked to the woods in precisely 9 minutes after leaving Thomas's front door. When the 9-minute mark came, they stopped and looked around. Investigators found a pair of black sneakers that contained Ellie's blood during the search in Thomas's room, which further added to the growing body of evidence. They also quickly found a black bin liner that contained blood-stained napkins, clothing, and towels that were later found to contain Ellie's DNA. Thomas was then taken into custody and accused of killing Ellie Gould. Thomas admitted in August 2019 that he intended to enter a guilty plea to the offense. He described going to Ellie's house early on May 2, confessing to a fight and a blackout, and stating that he was unable to remember what happened next. In a heartbreaking statement, Ellie's mother, Carol, recalled how the family welcomed Griffiths into their home and even shared in Ellie's birthday celebration, demonstrating their faith in him. After Ellie was murdered, she described the unthinkable experience of holding her cold hand, pain no parent should have to go through. At first, she was shocked that Griffiths, the naive boy who cherished their daughter, would hurt Ellie. Ellie's father, Matthew, talked about how the eerie sight of her still body plagued his sleep and daily activities constantly. It was revealed in court that Griffiths had abused Ellie after she rejected him. According to the autopsy, she was first rendered unconscious by pressure on her neck, then she was stabbed more than a dozen times before escaping. To trick investigators, Griffith set up the scene and put Ellie's hand on the knife he had left close to her neck. He even made a desperate attempt to convince his friends that the scratches on his face were self-inflicted. Thomas Griffiths was given a life sentence with the possibility of release after 12 years by the Bristol Crown Court in November 2019. Griffith's letter of apology was read aloud in court. Ellie's mother shook her head while gazing at Thomas. The court also pointed out that his use of a knife from the victim's home does not imply premeditation, taking into account his age as a mitigating factor, since life sentences for those under the age of 18 are prohibited by UK law. At the age of 29, Thomas Griffiths would be eligible for parole in 2031. The tragic tale of Ellie Gould served as a poignant reminder of the frailty of life and the ruthless robbery of dreams. She lost her future, her love, and her hopes. In addition, her predicament brought to light the difficulties in relationships that appear to be ideal. The sorrow of losing Ellie and the unrelenting quest for justice served as a warning to be careful who we allow into our lives. More generally, Carol Gould's advocacy for harsher punishments in situations such as Ellie's led to crucial discussions regarding domestic abuse and juvenile offender sentencing. Ellie's law, Carol's initiative, aimed to address the disparity in sentencing between those who bring weapons and those who use found weapons in heinous crimes, as well as for adolescent killers. Ellie's mother, Carol, and her family achieved victory after 2 arduous campaigns. Those who fought so hard for justice were relieved when, 2 years later, this new law made it possible for teenage killers to receive sentences of up to 27 years. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Elisa Claps, a high school student from Italy, disappeared in her hometown of Potenza in September 1993 D. She was unaccounted for almost 20 years. Elisa was last seen in person at the nearby Holy Trinity Church, where she had met up with a friend. It's commonly said that it's difficult to spot a dangerous criminal with a perverted mindset among regular people. Their ability to blend in is frightening. To those around them, they seem completely normal, average, and unremarkable. Their ability to cover their tracks, leaving crime scenes painstakingly devoid of evidence, is even more disturbing. This is the exact reason why it can be difficult for law enforcement to find and apprehend these criminals. It can take years, during which time they may carry out their heinous crimes. Let's examine this disturbing case now. On January 21, 1977, Elisa Maria Claps was born in the southern Italian town of Potenza, which is surrounded by mountains. She was the youngest of her family's 3 children. Her father ran a small tobacco shop, and her mother was a simple clerk. Elisa grew up with Gildo and Luciano, her 2 older brothers. The Claps family, who regularly attended Sunday services at their neighborhood church, was well known for being devout and strict. Driven by her desire to help people, Elisa was a bright and ambitious student who aspired to become a doctor. She was described as being very friendly, kind, and compassionate by those who knew her. She was naive and trusting at the same time, always having faith in other people. She had a natural ability to connect with people and quickly form friendships. Despite the attention she received from her peers, Elisa had never been in a romantic relationship by the time she turned 16. The boys at school definitely noticed her because of her lovely long hair and warm smile. However, because she came from a religious family, she graciously turned down every date invitation. In the early summer of 1993, an admirer became unsettlingly devoted. Danilo Restivo, a local, started displaying unwelcome and persistent interest in Elisa. The town was filled with disturbing rumors about Danilo, who was 5 years older. Elisa made an effort to avoid this strange man, who whenever he had the opportunity tried to entice her into remote areas. She was unable to be harsh or contemptuous due to her upbringing and innate kindness, and Danielle appeared to take her politeness as encouragement. In her private journal, Elisa wrote about Danielle, acknowledging that he both scared and made her feel sorry for him. Though she was careful never to be alone with him, she always tried to be polite because she saw how lonely and troubled he seemed. She always found a reason to get out of his presence as quickly as possible, usually by saying she had important errands to run. The Claps family took a vacation to the peaceful seaside town of Monte Giordano in the middle of August of that year. Elisa froze one day as she and her brother Gildo were walking through the quiet streets. She signaled to her brother not to leave her side by holding his hand tightly as Danilo approached them. As though they were old friends, Danilo greeted Elisa, and even asked her to accompany him, insisting that he needed her help with something. Gildo knew right away that something was amiss. As he led his sister away, he made up an excuse. He later questioned Elisa about whether Danilo had harmed her and why she had reacted that way. Although the man had never physically hurt her, Elisa admitted that he had been following her and that she was afraid of him. Around 5 p.m. on September 11th, the Claps family's phone rang. Elisa responded, and as she conversed with the person on the other end, her attitude rapidly changed. Her brother did not miss the growing somber and agitated expression on her face. Gildo inquired as to who had called after Elisa hung up. "It was Danilo," she said. Elisa adamantly declined Gildo's offer to confront him, claiming she could take care of it on her own. She thought she had everything under control and didn't want to cause any trouble. The enigmatical absence at church. Elisa's parents and brothers departed early on Sunday, September 12, 1993, for a day trip to Naples, which is roughly 90 miles away from Potenza. Elisa had remained behind, intending to join her close friend Elena for the morning service at the nearby church. Her family had returned from Naples by noon, and as everyone waited for Elisa and Elena, her mother made lunch. However, the girls had yet to return home as time went on. Someone knocked on the door at 1:45 p.m. Elena appeared nervous as she stood on the doorstep. She inquired as to Elisa's return, stating that they had become separated at the church and were unable to see one another. Elena claimed that she thought Elisa had already arrived at her house, but her account sounded flimsy, and she shifted uneasily, as though she were concealing something. Elena's distress increased when the family informed her that Elisa was still missing. She eventually acknowledged that she hadn't been truthful under duress. After the service, Elisa had actually stayed behind to talk to a young man. The two girls had planned to meet at the park afterwards before going to lunch, and the talk was only expected to last 10 minutes at most. However, neither 10 minutes nor an hour later did Elisa appear. As they conversed, Elisa grudgingly disclosed that Elisa's intended meeting with the young man was Danilo. Gildo's face turned pale at this. He alerted his brother and parents that Elisa might be in grave danger and that they should begin looking for her immediately. Danilo Restivo. Who was he? On April 3, 1972, Danilo Restivo was born in Irice, a tiny commune in the Sicilian province of Trapani. He came from a reasonably well-off family and was the youngest child. He was pampered and used to getting what he wanted as a child, and he was taught early on that there would never be any real repercussions for his actions. Regardless of the trouble he caused, his father was always there to support him. The Restivo family relocated to Potenza in the early 1980s, where Danilo's father, Mauricio, founded a prosperous company. In a matter of years, Mauricio rose to prominence as one of the richest and most powerful people in the city, developing close ties with local government and law enforcement. Danilo was notorious for being strange, impolite, and unsettlingly violent when he was in school. He was a reclusive and vicious youngster who was notorious for abusing animals, a habit that apparently gave him a deranged sense of fulfillment. In addition, he had a disturbing fixation on sharp objects. Despite being caught spying on girls in locker rooms on multiple occasions, Danilo appeared unaffected by any kind of intervention or discipline. He showed no remorse or desire to change, and he persisted in these actions with a stubborn, almost compulsive determination. Danilo Restivo had no true friends and was a recluse who was mostly shunned by his peers. He would frequently cut the hair of gullible girls because he had the unsettling habit of always having scissors with him. Parents complained repeatedly, but this unsettling behavior was ignored. Danilo would collect a large collection of hair clippings and take his trophies home. Strangely, his family didn't seem to notice any warning signs and instead dismissed this behavior as simple, childish mischief. Danilo's actions became more concerning as he grew older. His cruelty was not limited to animal abuse. He seemed to enjoy hurting other people. He still had trouble relating to people, especially girls, with whom he frequently acted aggressively and made an effort to threaten or harm them. The initial victim. Sonia, Danilo's younger cousin, was roughly a year and a half younger than him. They frequently walked home together from the same school. Danilo would often invite her to remote locations after class, making up a variety of reasons to entice her away. But Sonia was suspicious of her cousin. Her mother had specifically warned her not to go anywhere with him by herself, and her instincts told her to exercise caution. After promising to show Sonia a secret hiding place, Danilo was able to persuade her to follow him in the spring of 1987. Sensing that something was wrong, Sonia made the safe decision to bring her younger brother, Angelo, who was 11 years old. The three of them went into a wooded area where an old deserted shack stood after school. Danilo proposed a game in which players would be blindfolded. After Sonia and Angelo agreed to temporarily trust him, Danilo covered their eyes with blindfolds. There was a tense silence. Uneasy, Sonia shifted her blindfold just enough to get a glimpse and saw something horrifying. Her cousin was approaching Angelo, getting ready to attack and taking a pair of scissors from his backpack. Sonia startled her younger brother by screaming as loudly as she could. Angelo jerked away in an instinctive reaction, still with his eyes covered. Danilo's hand swung down, but the scissors sliced his shoulder rather than his neck. Danilo appeared to be stunned by the sight of blood and Sonia's shrill cries, which allowed the kids to flee in the few seconds they had left. With their cries resonating through the forest, Sonia and Angelo fled the shack and fled for their lives. Danilo screamed threats and demanded they keep quiet about what had happened as he pursued them. Sonia and Angelo outran him and made it to safety, motivated by their instinct for survival and sheer terror. What had happened appalled the parents of the injured children. They hurried Angelo to the hospital, where medical professionals were able to treat him in time to save his life. Despite suffering severe blood loss and nearly dying, the boy managed to survive. The parents reported the incident to the local police that same day, filing charges for attempted assault with deadly intent, but the case was quickly dismissed, and Danilo was spared any serious repercussions. There were rumors that his father shielded his youngest son by using his considerable influence. With the help of a local priest, Mr. Restivo assured Angelo's family that Danilo would be committed to a mental health facility for required therapy in order to stop similar incidents in the future. He also paid the family a sizable amount in compensation and paid for Angelo's medical bills. Soon after, the parents of Sonia and Angelo made the decision to relocate their family to Naples in order to avoid any more interactions with their dangerous relative. Although Danilo's father made solemn vows, he never fulfilled them. Danilo never even saw a specialist and was never sent for treatment. Mr. Mauricio Restivo was too worried that his son's reputation and social standing would be permanently harmed if he were to be classified as mentally unstable or a danger to others by a formal psychiatric evaluation. A perilous preference. After parents and students repeatedly complained about Danilo's violent and intimidating behavior, he was expelled from 4 different schools. He ultimately had to turn to homeschooling to finish his coursework and obtain his diploma. Since he was considered physically capable of serving, Danilo was drafted into the military at the age of 18. However, due to his unpredictable and erratic behavior, he was released within a few months. He went back home and remained protected by his powerful and affluent father, who continued to absolve him of responsibility. Danilo's actions only became more unsettling with time. When he fell in love, he would stalk girls, spy on them through their windows, make eerie late-night phone calls while remaining silent, and harass them in an uncomfortable way. His attempts to show romantic interest frequently turned violent, including luring them to abandoned places or attempting to chop off strands of their hair. Danilo's responses to these girls' rejection of his advances were frightening. He sent them letters outlining his disturbing fantasies or packages containing fictitious explosive devices marked with words like boom. Since Danilo's father always stepped in to protect him, no amount of complaints to the authorities seemed to have any effect. Danilo felt unstoppable and above the law because of this ongoing cover-up. He seemed rather innocuous to outsiders, more like a peculiar locality than a cunning or dangerous person. People like Elisa felt sorry for him because of his dishonest appearance, and they even wished they could assist. The church is the target of the missing girl's search. Elisa's brothers and parents immediately began a frantic search. The local church where she was last seen was their first destination. Elisa had intended to confront Danilo Restivo that day to request that he stop pursuing her and give her some space. According to her friend, a number of witnesses were promptly located who attested to seeing the high school student conversing with Danilo outside the church. However, None of them were able to provide information regarding the two's subsequent whereabouts. In an effort to talk to Danilo, Elisa's mother tried calling the Restivo residence, but Mauricio, Danilo's father, picked up the phone and wouldn't let her talk to his son. The Claps family drove to the Restivo home, growing more and more alarmed, but nobody answered the door. They had no choice but to report Elisa missing to law enforcement. Maurizio met officers at the Restivo residence and informed them that his son had left for Naples on some errands and would not return until the next day. Authorities quickly learned, however, that Danilo was in fact at home. After returning home, the police demanded to speak with Danilo and took him to the station so they could question him. His father kept getting in the way, making it hard to get definitive answers, so they had to do this. Danilo's account was riddled with contradictions. He acknowledged that he had talked to Elisa at the church, but he said she had left shortly after, leaving him to pray. He gave a hazy and contradictory account, and it was obvious that he was lying because of his obvious nervousness. After leaving the church, Danilo was unable to explain where he had gone and was unable to produce the clothing he had been wearing that day, which he seemed to have thrown away. Additionally, investigators found a pair of his shoes that had been left in a bleach-filled tub for almost 2 days. Any possible blood traces had, of course, been eliminated. Danilo was unable to provide a satisfactory explanation for the suspicious cut on his hand, which detectives also noticed. He was unable to provide the precise location of the incident, but he stated that he tripped and cut himself on something sharp as he was leaving the church. His story was further undermined by the fact that the wound looked as though it had been caused by a sharp blade. The suspect is safe with the prosecutor. Danilo's father moved quickly to defend him in spite of his evasive behavior, refusal to give up his clothing and shoes for examination, and convoluted web of contradictory statements. Maurizio promptly engaged 2 of Naples' top defense lawyers to defend his son. In light of these challenges, the investigating police asked the city's chief prosecutor for authorization to acquire a warrant in order to search the suspect's house and confiscate his clothes and shoes in the hopes of discovering any evidence connecting him to Elisa's disappearance. They required legal authority. Surprisingly, the city's chief prosecutor showed no concern in the face of overwhelming evidence linking Danilo to the young girl's disappearance. He declined to grant a search warrant for either the church where Elisa was last seen or Danilo's house. The church was only briefly searched, and Father Domenico Sabbia, the lead priest, steadfastly refused to let anyone into the padlocked wooden staircase secured upstairs room. The prosecutor refused to issue a warrant to conduct a thorough investigation of the church and the rooms that are adjacent to it, despite pressure. Father Domenico suspiciously used the past tense when referring to Elisa right away, as though he was aware that she was dead. 3 weeks following Elisa's disappearance, Danilo was featured as the main suspect and his photo was displayed in a local news segment about the case. After this broadcast, dozens of women called the police station to report that Danilo had been harassing and stalking them. They disclosed his unsettling fixation on women's hair and his propensity to carry scissors, which he used to try to covertly chop off strands of hair from gullible victims in parks, city streets, and even on public transit. Dedicated investigators' persistence allowed them to ultimately accuse Danilo of making false statements. He received a sentence of 2.5 years in prison in the spring of 1995. However, his sentence was commuted to community service, ironically at the same church where Elisa had vanished, after less than 2 months in prison. A new investigation and a new prosecutor. When police detained a criminal organization's leader in 1999, the investigation into Elisa's disappearance came to a standstill. Despite his lack of knowledge regarding Elisa's case, he revealed damaging details about the city's top prosecutor. He claimed that the prosecutor had engaged in corruption by taking bribes, concealing crimes, and purposefully sabotaging investigations. These claims led to a major shift, even though they were regarded as hearsay and the informant was subsequently charged with defamation. Elisa's case was given to a new lead investigator and prosecutor, who essentially began from scratch. They were eventually given a search warrant for Danilo's home this time. The search turned up something concerning, even though the exact clothes and shoes he had worn on the day Elisa vanished were not there. Danilo's room was filled with a large collection of hair strands from many different girls. investigators discovered a sizable box containing pictures of nude and semi-nude women beneath Danilo's bed. By spying on his victims in showers, locker rooms, fitting rooms, and even through their home windows, he had taken these pictures himself. Sadly, he also retained a different collection of pictures showing women who had had limbs amputated. Although his severe psychological problems were evident, this did not lead to any new information in the case of Elisa Claps, who went missing. 6 years after Elisa's disappearance, police attempted to search the church once more, but Father Domenico refused to let them into the locked upstairs room. By using his connections and portraying the investigation as an effort to desecrate a place of worship, he went to considerable measures to stop the search, and even mobilized churchgoers against the officers. A letter from the beyond and a move. Even after the new investigation, Danilo left his hometown and set out on a lengthy journey across Europe because there was no conclusive evidence against him. He persisted in stalking women and cutting their hair whenever he could, but he had to be more careful without the protection of his powerful father. Danilo would immediately relocate to a different city or even a different nation if his actions were likely to result in legal repercussions. An unexpected letter, purportedly written by Elisa herself, was delivered to the Claps family in the early 2000s SS. According to the message, she was still alive and well and had fled to Brazil with a romantic partner. The author requested that her family not try to find her or get in touch. However, the handwriting clearly differed from Elisa's. By comparing it to her personal diary and school notebooks, anyone could see the difference. In addition, there were numerous obvious grammatical mistakes in the letter, indicating that the author was not well educated. Unsurprisingly, the Claps family's own investigation revealed Danilo to be the source of their suspicions. He had somehow chosen to write the letter while he was visiting his parents, posing as Elisa in an unsuccessful attempt to deceive her loved ones. A fresh victim. Heather Barnett, 48, was killed in a vicious crime that shook the sleepy British town of Bournemouth on November 12, 2002. When her 2 teenage children got home from school, they made the terrible discovery. The mutilated and lifeless body of Heather was discovered in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor. Her skull displayed evidence of multiple blunt force trauma, most likely from a hammer blow, and her throat had been slashed. The removal of her breasts and their placement next to her head, however, was the most unsettling part of the crime. A lock of hair that wasn't Heather's was in her hand. There had been no struggle to tear this hair out. The scissors had cut it neatly. Furthermore, Heather had had a portion of her own hair cut. These unsettling specifics raised the possibility that the crime was ritualistic. Investigators quickly focused on Fiamma Marsango and her husband Danilo Restivo, Heather's odd neighbors. The victim's house was only a short distance away from the couple's residence, which was next door. Danilo had approached her inappropriately and Heather had complained about him on multiple occasions. She told a friend that she was afraid of her husband, even though they were married, right before the crime. Heather took custom orders from her home and worked as a seamstress. Under the guise of commissioning clothing, Danilo frequently attempted to visit her. He insisted on going inside to discuss specifics, even though he never placed any specific orders. Heather discovered her house keys were gone 2 days prior to the tragedy, following one of Danilo's visits. At the time, she assumed she had just lost them and didn't relate this to her neighbor. Regretfully, she hadn't managed to change the locks yet. Even before the police and emergency personnel arrived, Danilo was among the first individuals on the scene. He said he was on his way home when he heard Heather's kids screaming in terror and hurried to assist. Officers brought him in for interrogation, but they soon let him go because he seemed incompetent and unthreatening. But after his most recent visit, Heather's kids pointed to him as a cause for concern, stating that they were also uncomfortable around their odd neighbor and brought up the missing keys. The police chose to closely monitor Danilo because they had no immediate reason to search his house. They soon discovered him performing a disturbing act. Danilo was discovered stalking a young woman and trying to cut a lock of her hair while holding scissors on the street. He was taken into custody by officers, who also searched his car and requested his identification. They discovered an unsettling assortment in the trunk, including extra pairs of shoes, a change of clothes, and a set of knives. This, along with his questionable actions, ultimately produced sufficient proof to secure a search warrant for his home. When investigators searched Danilo Restivo's house, they were shocked by what they found. They discovered multiple albums containing hair he had cut from different women. Sneakers and clothing were soaking in a tub filled with bleach in the bathroom. The missing keys belonging to Heather Barnett, which are currently in Restivo's room, were the most damning piece of evidence. Although there were blood traces on the clothes, the samples were too badly ruined by the bleach to be identified. But Danilo's DNA was found on a towel in Heather's restroom, indicating that he used it to wipe blood splatter off his face. A body in the attic of the church, and two beliefs. Authorities discovered Danilo's troubling past as they investigated the murder of Heather Barnett. He had been the main suspect in the disappearance of a high school girl in his hometown 9 years prior. The girl's body had never been found at the time, and investigators had not discovered enough conclusive evidence. But now that there was ample evidence of his violent tendencies and no powerful father to defend him, Danilo was put on trial, convicted of premeditated murder, and given a 40-year prison term without the chance of release. Then, in the attic of the same church where Elisa Claps had last been sighted, construction workers found her mummified remains in March 2010, 17 years after she had vanished. Father Domenico Sabbia had refused to let the police in through the locked door, concealing her body. Although it was obvious that Father Domenico had kept a horrible secret, he had long since died by this point, and it was impossible to pinpoint exactly what part he'd played in hiding the crime. There were unsettling parallels between Elisa's body and Heather Barnett's case. The cause of death was a slashed throat, and her chest had been similarly mutilated. Her underwear had also been soiled, indicating a violent personal attack. Bloodstains on Elisa's deteriorated clothing matched those of Restivo, who had hurt himself during the attack, and fingerprints were found at the scene. An uncanny signature that mirrored the evidence from Heather's murder was a lock of hair in Elisa's hand that wasn't hers. Since Restivo was already serving his 40-year sentence in the UK, he was tried in absentia for Elisa Clap's murder. He was found guilty once more based on overwhelming evidence, and this time he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He will be extradited to Italy to serve an extra 30 years for the heinous attack on Elisa. After serving his sentence in the UK, although Restivo's involvement in other unsolved murders and disappearances has not been proven, authorities suspect that he may have had many more victims. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The police didn't know they were entering a house of horrors when they started looking into a murder case on February 16, 1981. There was something really strange about the house. The nightmare that started inside those walls, however, would not stay contained. Indeed, it was on the verge of seeping into reality. Although the nation would be shocked by Alan Bono's murder in Connecticut, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson's terrifying allegation of demonic possession would garner the most media attention. Supported by Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators, this case was unheard of. But were the demons inside, or the supernatural really to blame? Many believe David was just suffering from a mental illness. The true crime behind the film, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is presented to you this Halloween. The first illegal killing in Brookfield's history had occurred on the evening of February 16, 1981. With dense woods on either side, Brookfield Police Department Sergeant Gordon Fairchild slowed his patrol car when he saw a man stumbling down the road. The figure looked confused, as if intoxicated, and his appearance suggested a straightforward case of public intoxication. One particular detail, however, would lead to the most contentious case of the decade. Tiny blood droplets were scattered all over the man's clothing. He didn't appear to be in a state to describe the bloodstains or his location. He admitted to the officer that he had a drinking problem and needed assistance. The man was captured by Fairchild, who escorted him back to the cruiser. The sergeant didn't know the man, but that night would be the beginning of the most bizarre case he would ever work on, one that would ultimately rock the foundations of the American legal system. A call came in as he was getting the man settled in the car. 2 miles away, a horrific murder had been attempted. According to reports, the suspect had escaped into the woods. Detective Fairchild knew then that the man they were searching for was Arne Cheyenne Johnson, who was seated next to him. They took him in to question him. Investigating the horrifying murder attempt further, they found that Alan Bono, 40, was lying in a pool of his own blood. A 5-inch knife had stabbed him several times in a gory manner. One of the stab wounds extended from his stomach to the base of his heart, which made the situation worse. The autopsy had completed the case, the fingerprints on the knife had been positively identified, and there were eyewitnesses to the assault. The proof was unquestionable. Investigators were certain that Alan Bono was murdered by Arne Cheyenne Johnson. However, it was the why, the reason for the action, that would transform this otherwise straightforward case into a riddle that defied reason and has sparked debate to this day. Alan, the victim, was still receiving medical attention at a hospital on the day Arne was captured. Arne was told that he would now face murder charges after Alan passed away from his injuries. Arne's unexpected reaction was to take a 25-minute power nap. Police Detective Sergeant John Lucas formally charged him with first-degree murder after reading him his rights when he awoke. Arne's only response during the interrogation was that he had no memory of the murder's time and that he didn't intend to harm anyone. Before the murder, he last recalled being out to lunch with his landlord Alan Bono with his wife Debbie Glatzel, her cousin Mary, and his own sister Wanda Johnson. His memory went blank after that. Debbie, Arne's wife, was called in to answer questions about what happened that day and to fill in the blanks her husband had left. The detectives had no idea that her story would lead to a barrage of the strangest explanations they had ever heard during questioning. She started by giving a description of the deceased, Alan Bono, an Australian who had offered Debbie a job and rented his house to them. For the young couple, he was more of a friend than a landlord or boss. The beginning of that afternoon was pleasant, full of laughter and family, but Alan's attitude changed as he drank too much. In addition to taunting Arne about a sinister past that had been buried but was now resurfacing, he started making offensive comments about the girls. Alan kept pushing Arne's buttons, but there was something about his past that disturbed him, something so sinister. Alan provoked Arne more and more with each taunt until he lost control and got to his feet. But there was a problem. A low, guttural sound escaped Arne's throat as his body tensed and his expression twisted. He was growling, not just angry. It became evident that a physical altercation was unavoidable, despite Wanda, Mary, and Debbie's best efforts to diffuse the mounting tension. Wanda flung herself between the two men, but Arne suddenly produced a knife, and the women watched in horror as what transpired. As though possessed, Arne repeatedly and wildly stabbed Alan until he was lying in a pool of blood. Then Arne suddenly jerked to her feet and fled. Debbie said it wasn't just different from Arne. It wasn't Arne at all. He wasn't acting alone, supposedly. During this strange interrogation, renowned paranormal investigator Lorraine Warren called the Brookfield police station because they believed that an outside force, which they dubbed the Beast, was silently pulling the strings. She was going to say something so out of the ordinary that it would make the case even stranger. It was a malicious demon within Arne, she thought, and he was innocent. Despite the fact that the detectives clearly didn't believe her, she persisted and requested that they look over their earlier records. The police were astounded by what they saw when they examined the documents from a few months prior. Lorraine had called, and she had already told the detectives that a murder like this one was bound to happen. Neither Ed Warren nor Lorraine Warren had attained their later prominence at this point. However, it was becoming evident that Debbie and Arne had a strong ally in the Warrens, who were willing to support their bizarre allegations with their contentious knowledge, if they were lying to get away with murder. If there was a demon, why would it attack Alan? How could he have caused such a violent reaction? The demon that lived in Arne allegedly took control and showed Alan where he belonged because Alan had constantly made fun of and taunted him. Lorraine implied that the demon had a purpose and was connected to something much more profound than just a random force. She claimed that the solution was found in the troubled past of Debbie's family, which included not only the Warrens, but also her brother David Glatzel, who was 11 years old. The clock was running out as the investigators got ready to delve into this sinister past, and the story was only going to get stranger by the second. The realities that awaited them were more horrifying than their worst fears. It started in Bridgeport, Connecticut, during the summer of 1980. Arn and young Debbie were searching for rental properties to move in together after becoming engaged. At that point, they discovered a house close to a well. They made the decision to move in since the house was roomy and better than others in their price range. Debbie's family provided assistance with the move. However, their idyllic reality would soon be shattered by the dream home. David, Debbie's younger brother, had been asked to sweep the master bedroom, but after a while she discovered him outside in the yard, clearly shaken. He insisted on going home without cleaning the room. Debbie gave the assignment to her older brother Alan after realizing something was amiss. However, Alan also felt uneasy shortly after beginning and promptly requested to leave. During dinner at their mother's house that evening, David and Alan both related disturbing tales about what had happened to them that day. These tales would soon be woven into something much darker. David said a man shoved him back onto the bed and threatened to hurt him and his family. Alan said he had had a similar experience. The door suddenly slammed shut in his face as he felt a ghostly presence watching him. The family believed in the supernatural and was very religious. They were therefore certain that the house was haunted. They started looking for other options after giving up the rental property. The family's encounters with the paranormal did not end there, though. David started exhibiting alarming symptoms of an unidentified cause right away. He frequently communicated the beast's messages to the family because he thought he could hear it in his ears. He thought the beast had come through the storage beneath the house and was at their door one day. Each of these incidents then added to the others, and the family was unable to turn back. David claimed to have had the impression that someone was following or watching him. He was terrified and unable to sleep as a result of his intense nightmares, which were full of images of hideous people. Family members started to see David's distress firsthand. Some reported that he would speak in deep, strange voices or show unusual strength. David's family sought assistance from famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren after realizing how serious the situation was. Famous for their work on a number of haunting cases, the Warrens thought David was under demonic possession. They documented the strange events through a series of investigations and interviews with the Glatzel family. David reportedly had violent outbursts during one particularly intense session, claiming that a malevolent entity was torturing him. The Warrens thought that this ghost had taken hold of David and was attacking him physically and mentally. The Warrens and a number of priests performed several exorcisms at the Glatzel residence in an effort to rid David of the alleged demon. David frequently screamed, convulsed, and displayed strange behaviors during the rituals, making these sessions tense and frightening. The Warrens claimed that David's suffering was so intense that he would physically attack family members and anyone else who was around when the exorcisms were taking place. During these sessions, the exorcists claimed to have seen odd things like moving objects, cold spots in the room, and a sense of an oppressive presence. David claimed to have overheard voices mocking him during this period, claiming that he was helpless and would never be able to escape its hold. The young child suffered a severe psychological injury, becoming scared and perplexed, and frequently doubting his own reality. Following months of suffering and several unsuccessful attempts, a team of priests, assisted by Ed and Lorraine Warren, performed David Glatzel's last exorcism. Among the rituals carried out, this exorcism is frequently characterized as the most severe and hazardous. David's behavior peaked in a terrifying way during the session. It was reported that his voice sounded unnaturally guttural. "You are repulsed by Jesus," the priests chanted, "Leave this child alone." Those involved claimed that David had demonstrated supernatural strength well beyond his physical capabilities and had levitated off his bed. Following what felt like hours of fervent spiritual struggle, David's condition abruptly changed. His body, which had been stiff and tense during the exorcism, began to loosen up. David was calm for the first time in months as his screams stopped. The priests and the Warrens thought that the demon had finally been expelled at this point. David didn't display the violent and unpredictable behavior he had previously displayed. Instead, he looked tired but lucid. Witnesses to his ordeal, his family described the moment as a relief, a weight being taken off their lives and their home. Nevertheless, although the exorcism was terminated, the demon continued to exist. Everything would be completely upended at this point. Here, the startling link between Arn and the eerie case of demonic possession started to emerge. exposing facts that nobody could have predicted. Ed and Lorraine Warren, as well as the Glatzel family, said that Arne had grown impatient with the demon's seeming control over David. During one of the exorcism sessions, Arne confronted the entity thought to be torturing David in a show of defiance and concern. He yelled at the demon, demanding that it abandon David and take possession of him instead. They said, "Take me on," Arne said. "If you're so strong, leave David alone and come into me." These words were meant to be a taunt, challenging the evil force to target him instead of young David. This challenge that Arne presented to the demon deeply troubled Lorraine. She thought a horrible thing might happen, so she called the Brookfield police to express her fear that something terrible was going to happen. And it did. As events transpired, investigators were certain that Arne and his followers had a story that was both frightening and humorous, but unquestionably implausible. From the investigators' point of view, the day's events were simple. After consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, Arne and Alan ended up with young girls. Alan's offensive comment about Arne's sister-in-law pushed Arne over the edge, escalating the tension. Under the influence of alcohol and his tumultuous past with the Glatzel family, Arne either lost his mind or used this as an easy excuse to confront Alan physically before leaving. The charges against him were based on this. However, what would Arne's defense entail? Did he have a crime? He would make a plea that would catch the attention of everyone on the planet, not just one of simple guilt. Ed and Lorraine Warren said during the trial, which started in October 1981, "We're going to take the devil to court." Martin Minella, Arne's defense lawyer, claimed that because Arne was under the influence of a demon at the time of the murder, he was not accountable for his actions. Such a defense was employed for the first time in American history. Minella attempted to have the Warrens testify regarding the alleged possession by Johnson and the exorcisms. Additionally, he intended to subpoena the priests who were performing the exorcisms. The defense team maintained that Arne's actions could only be explained by demonic influence. However, the defense of demonic possession was promptly dismissed by the case's presiding judge, Judge Robert Callahan. Because it was not verifiable by any legal or scientific standards, he decided that such a defense could not be used in court. Supernatural claims are not admissible under the American legal system, which is founded on observable facts and logical reasoning. After the demonic possession defense was rejected, Arne's legal team turned to self-defense. Judge Callahan said, "The courts have dealt with the existence of God. Now they're going to have to deal with the existence of the devil." The next question on the trial was whether Arne had acted in self-defense during an altercation with Alan Bono while intoxicated. According to testimony given during the trial, Alan started the deadly altercation by grabbing Mary Glatzel, the sister of Arne's girlfriend, and refusing to let her go. Although the specifics of the altercation were unclear, witnesses stated that Alan had been drinking excessively and had become agitated. Assistant State's Attorney Walter Flanagan led the prosecution's argument that Arne stabbed Alan on purpose, although the prosecution argued that the murder was the consequence of a heated argument rather than any supernatural influence. Johnson had a history of good behavior and no violent tendencies. The jury deliberated based on the evidence presented in court, despite the case's sensational nature and the initial defense's reliance on the demonic possession argument. On November 24, 1981, the jury found Arne Johnson guilty of first-degree manslaughter. Following 15 hours of deliberation, the jury agreed with the defense's arguments of mitigating circumstances, such as the fight between Arne and Alan, and rejected the notion that the murder was premeditated or that Johnson had acted with malice aforethought. Due to his good behavior, Arne was released from prison in 1986 after serving only 5 of the 10 to 20 years that he had been sentenced to. The case has had a long-lasting impact on popular culture, in addition to the legal field. Its status in paranormal lore has been solidified by Ed and Lorraine Warren's involvement with the case. Standing by their assertions that Arne Johnson had been influenced by a malevolent force and that the devil was the one who forced him to do it, they continued to write books and give interviews. The case further cemented its place in the history of the paranormal in America when it was dramatized in the popular movie The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It in 2021. As a result, the February 16, 1981 case, which was initially thought to be an open and shut case, has been a source of fascination and wonder for many years, and is still one of the most fascinating cases to be remembered on Halloween. Why did the demon, if it was responsible, attach itself to David in spite of multiple exorcisms, but lay dormant in Arne both before and after the murder? Did Arne get away with the most egregious excuse in criminal history? How did Lorraine Warren alert the Brookfield police prior to the actual murder, if it wasn't paranormal? Those who read this terrifying story are still plagued by these questions. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Generally speaking, psychopath is not a recognized diagnosis. Rather, it describes a variety of personality disorders that range in severity from mild to severe. Individuals with these conditions frequently exhibit a pronounced imbalance in their behavior and character. While some feelings and emotions are totally dominant, others are noticeably absent. These people are all characterized by a poor capacity for impulse and emotion control. Today's story perfectly captures the good and pleasant appearance of someone with these qualities, as well as the true nature of their uncontrollable and excessively strong emotional reactions. Young Australian Danielle Finlay Jones was looking for her own happiness when she came across the ideal man online, someone who vowed to love her no matter what. What resulted from this, you will soon learn. On October 20, 1991, Danielle Finlay Jones was born in Cranebrook, Western Sydney. Growing up with her older brother Blake, who had always protected and cared for her, she was the youngest of two siblings. When she was only 4 years old, her parents got divorced. Danielle and Blake remained with their mother Jacqueline following the divorce, and their father was hardly involved in their lives or upbringing. Sports were Danielle's passion from an early age. Although she engaged in multiple activities concurrently, soccer was always her favorite. She joined a neighborhood soccer team when she was a schoolgirl. Since the majority of the girls in her neighborhood preferred dance or gymnastics, she initially had to play with boys. Danielle went on to become the team's captain, win multiple major sporting honors, win the respect of her teammates, and win the admiration of the supporters. She eventually began coaching young teams, and in 2017, she even served as the face of a significant marketing campaign for women's soccer. Danielle studied education and social work at the University of Sydney after graduating from high school. After graduating, she continued to play sports while working as a teacher at a nearby school. By nature, Danielle was a fighter who never gave up and consistently succeeded in her endeavors. She excelled in both fields and was able to build a successful career in both. Danielle was described as bright, well-read, and gregarious by those who knew her. She effortlessly became the life of the party and had a great sense of humor. Danielle cherished fun, dancing, and raucous parties. She was regarded as an endless source of energy and a creative powerhouse. More than her attractive features and toned athletic body, Danielle Finlay Jones was well known for her generosity and readiness to assist those in need. Not surprisingly, she attracted attention, and numerous men attempted to win her love. But Danielle put her work and fitness above her personal life, putting relationships not only on the back burner, but also far behind her athletic and professional goals. Danielle remained in her mother Jacqueline's house even after she became an independent adult. They behaved more like best friends than mother and daughter because they were so close. They were verbally compatible, spent almost all of their free time together, and shared everything, including going to concerts, social gatherings, and even club nights. They never had significant arguments or secrets. Danielle started giving having children serious thought by the time she was in her 30s. Despite having a good job, a stable income, and a wide network of friends, she was still very lonely. She yearned for love and a fulfilling relationship with someone she could fully trust. Someone she could spend her days with and grow old with. Danielle had a lot of admirers, but she had no experience in committed relationships. Despite dating and getting lots of attention, she had never considered her boyfriends to be life partners. She didn't hesitate to end the relationship if it ever got in the way of her professional or personal objectives. She was prepared for something more substantial and long-lasting now, though. Danielle regularly engaged with friends and acquaintances on the various social media platforms she actively maintained. Although she got a lot of messages from men who wanted to chat or ask her out, she thought that sincere relationships were more likely to occur on specialized dating sites. On the recommendation of her friends, she made a profile on the well-known app Tinder. Following months of chatting and swiping through various men, Danielle got a message from Ashley Gaddy, a handsome man. He was affable, kind, and charming, and he was 4 years her senior. Ashley proposed that they go on a date in person after a week of texting. Everything went well on their first date. They shared personal stories, laughed, and talked endlessly. They clicked right away and had a lot in common, making it seem like they had known each other for ages. With his warmth and sense of humor, Ashley won Danielle over with his charm and charisma. Danielle was so taken with Ashley after just a few dates that she chose to present him to her mother, Jacqueline, who was equally enchanted, fully approved Ashley, and thought he would make a wonderful husband and eventually a loving father. But it didn't take long for Ashley's actual character to emerge. He was intensely envious and domineering. Danielle was surprisingly unconcerned by this. She actually thought it was flattering. Before, no one had ever attempted to control her or dictate her choices, so this new dynamic felt novel and fascinating to her. Danielle interpreted Ashley's jealousy as an expression of affection and love. She even thought it was flattering. Ashley, however, was attempting to take complete control of her life and social relationships within a month of dating. Danielle did not raise any concerns, in spite of these warning signs. Rather, she chose to play the part of the ideal girlfriend and comply with his actions. Danielle made the shocking decision to ignore the clear indications that Ashley was not who he appeared to be. Ignoring his problematic behavior, she started to seriously plan their future together, even thinking about getting married. Her inexperience in committed relationships most likely contributed significantly to the course of events. Ashley kept up his portrayal of being compassionate and kind, telling Danielle that he had always wanted a family. She was greatly moved by this and became even more trusting of him. But the first person to notice that something was amiss was one of Danielle's closest friends. She observed that Ashley's jealousy occasionally turned into unpredictable actions, giving the impression that he was someone entirely different. However, Danielle ignored her friend's worries because she was too preoccupied with her own feelings. Danielle introduced Ashley to her mother and several close friends during their month-long relationship, but the majority of those in her social circle were only aware of him through her tales. Danielle intended to introduce Ashley to more of her friends at a friendly get-together at a well-known city bar on Saturday, December 17, 2022. The group got together at the bar to enjoy drinks, dancing, and light conversation during the evening. Ashley left a lasting impact. He was gregarious, courteous, and amiable. He and Danielle sat together all evening, frequently holding hands and grinning at each other. There was no sign of any impending conflict, and they appeared to be a happy and loving couple. Since Danielle had never intended to enter into committed long-term relationships, she had never introduced her previous boyfriends to her friends. However, things were different this time. Considering that they had only been dating for a little more than a month, she surprised everyone by presenting Ashley almost like a fiancé. Nevertheless, her friends recognized the significance of this relationship for her. Everything appeared to be going well until someone in the group proposed a game in which everyone would respond at random to daring and thought-provoking questions. People spontaneously came up with original and eccentric questions, and it was all in good fun. Danielle was asked if she had ever had a one-night stand with a stranger when it was her turn. There was silence in the room. Danielle paused, then smiled shyly and confessed that she had, obviously embarrassed. At that point, Ashley's attitude changed significantly. He became hostile and unpredictable, and his face hardened. He grabbed Danielle by the arm, twisted her around, and started shouting at her in front of everyone. Using harsh and derogatory language, he accused her of being careless and immoral. The other guests were taken aback and couldn't tell if Ashley was kidding or taking it seriously. As they observed Danielle, who seemed equally perplexed and taken by surprise, the atmosphere became awkward. Ashley's sudden outburst at her was beyond her comprehension. Ashley asserted that Danielle had denied answering a similar question about brief romantic encounters when he had asked her about it on their first date. Ashley took it personally, because she had now responded differently and in public. He experienced an uncontrollable and intense emotional reaction as a result of her thoughtless response in the playful game. He just blew up with rage, and his condition almost went out of control. Danielle felt bad about what had happened and attempted to defuse the situation even though Ashley's response was wildly out of proportion. Ashley angrily shoved her away and hurried out of the bar when she tried to make amends. He persisted in the argument even outside, sending her a string of derogatory texts. Danielle expressed regret to her friends for the incident and promised to speak with Ashley in person to try to soothe him. She found him outside and stayed away from him for 15 minutes or so before they went back to the bar together. They resumed their seats with the group as though nothing had occurred. Although the awkward tension among those who had witnessed it persisted, it appeared that the argument had been settled. In an effort to prevent more confrontation, no one brought up the incident again. The group attributed it to stress, alcohol, and anxiety related to meeting new people. Ashley remained composed throughout the rest of the evening, which went by without incident. At midnight, the group started to disperse. Danielle had already made plans to spend the night with Ashley at her friend Taylor's house because she had a long way to go home. Taylor didn't mind because the bar was only a 20-minute drive from his suburban home. Rachel, Taylor's girlfriend, offered to drive them there since she hadn't had any alcohol that evening. On the lower level of his house, Taylor set up a comfortable guest room for Danielle and Ashley. It was a large bedroom with a separate bathroom. It was quiet and comfortable, with a few small windows near the ceiling that let in very little light. Thanking their host for his hospitality, Danielle and Ashley took their seats for the night. The couple appeared to be calm and collected, as if nothing had happened, and the earlier argument had apparently been forgotten. Taylor awoke to odd sounds emanating from the guest room at around 3 in the morning. Rachel, his girlfriend, also stirred and gave him a curious look. They heard what sounded like muffled cries and faint thuds. They ignored the sounds and returned to their sleep, assuming the couple had made up and were having a private moment. The house became quiet in a matter of minutes, and they slept peacefully until Taylor and Rachel woke up at 10:30 a.m. Their guests had not yet left the room, which surprised them. The couple chose not to bother them out of respect for their privacy and the assumption that they were getting some rest after the night before. However, as 2 p.m. drew closer, and Taylor went downstairs to see how Danielle and Ashley were doing, since they were still nowhere to be seen, he gently rapped on the door but received no answer. He knocked more loudly after a brief pause, but nothing changed. Taylor cautiously opened the door and took a quick look inside out of concern. It looked like the room was empty at first. There was no bed made. Danielle's shoes were carefully laid out on the floor and her clothes were slung over a chair. But there was something unnerving about the room's strange silence. A blanket on the floor close to the wall caught Taylor's attention as soon as he entered. He could see the outline of a body beneath it. Taylor hurried over and lifted the blanket in panic. Danielle was brutally attacked and strangled, and her lifeless body was found on the floor, naked. Her face had been reduced to a terrible jumble of blood and wounds, so badly deformed that it was nearly unrecognizable. Her body was cold and stiff, and she had no signs of life, as if she had been dead for hours. Ashley was nowhere to be seen, but the guest room's partially open window suggested that he might have gotten away undetected. Taylor told Rachel everything as she fled the room in terror. The couple called the police and emergency services right away because they were frightened and shaken. But for Danielle, it was too late. Only her death could be confirmed by paramedics. They initially determined that she had passed away at around 3 in the morning, which coincided with Taylor and Rachel hearing the odd sounds coming from the guest room. They might have been able to save her life if they had checked on her at that time. After Danielle's body was removed for forensic analysis, the horrific severity of her wounds was discovered. She had been severely beaten with bare hands, as evidenced by the multiple wounds she had sustained prior to her death. In addition to having multiple brain hemorrhages and a closed skull fracture from the vicious beating, she also had fractures to her nose, jaw, and cheekbone, as well as several teeth and one eye destroyed. The assailant seemed to have pinned her under his weight to keep her from fleeing, pushed her to the ground, and covered her mouth to silence her screams. Then he pounded his fist repeatedly, methodically hitting her head. Danielle probably passed out at some point, but the attack went on. With unrelenting aggression, the attacker alternated between fists and strikes. Mechanical asphyxiation was identified as Danielle's cause of death. Bare hands had been used to strangle her. Ashley was unquestionably guilty of the crime based on the evidence. He didn't try to hide his identity, he just washed his hands in the restroom after the act, changed into his clothes, and fled through the window, leaving his fingerprints on the frame. Investigators quickly found a witness who reported seeing someone leave Taylor's home at 4:30 in the morning. The neighbor described the man as a white man wearing clothing that matched Ashley's outfit that evening, but she was unable to get a clear picture of his face. Investigators were pursuing the suspect when they contacted Ashley's cell phone provider and acquired a recording of a call he made to his mother shortly after the crime, at around 4 a.m. Ashley was still in the room with Danielle's body when the call came in. His frantic state was evident in the conversation. He kept saying that he had done nothing wrong while sobbing uncontrollably. He claimed to have only found Danielle's body, while Ashley insisted that someone else had entered the room and hurt her. He sounded as though he was making a valiant effort to persuade himself and his mother of this made-up story. Luckily, authorities were able to track Ashley's location because he neglected to turn off his phone after the call. He had apparently tried to hide in a remote mountainous area where he had fled. Eventually, police found him by a precipitous cliff close to a picturesque overlook. Ashley jumped over the safety barrier and clung to the cliff's edge as they got closer, threatening to jump if anyone got too close. Psychologists and negotiators with specialized training were sent to the scene. They tried to reassure Ashley for hours that he had nothing to fear if he was really innocent. Ashley continued to sit on the edge of her seat for almost 12 hours of the negotiations. Officers caught Ashley, who was tired and distracted, as midnight drew near, and they were able to pull him back to safety. Ashley exhibited unpredictable behavior. He cried, screamed, resisted, and made repeated threats to commit suicide. It was impossible to question him in his unstable state. After being transported to a mental health facility, experts stabilized him and determined that he had been in such a heightened emotional state that, had the officers not intervened in time, he probably would have jumped. Ashley was subsequently diagnosed with a number of mental illnesses, including excitable psychopathy, which is characterized by unprovoked violent episodes and abrupt outbursts of rage. The investigators looked into Ashley Gaddy's past after his arrest, but they were appalled by what they found. He had many victims before Danielle. More than 10 women have reported him to the police in the last 2 years alone, alleging physical assaults, attempted harm, and requests for protection from his harassment and stalking. It turned out that Ashley was fatherless, had serious mental health problems from an early age, and was extremely violent toward other people. His own mother and 2 sisters were his first victims. They endured his violent outbursts and physical aggression in silence, without reporting him, because they were afraid of what would happen to their family. Ashley could seem perfectly normal and sensible when he was at ease. However, this facade could be broken by the slightest trigger, revealing what could only be described as a monstrous side. Ashley experienced abrupt and severe fixations during his adolescence, especially in his relationships with women. His attractive appearance and endearing nature made it easy for him to find new romantic partners. However, he soon saw these women as his property after becoming involved. He would become violent if a girlfriend attempted to argue with him. When a partner broke up with her, he would start stalking and attacking her whenever he had the chance. At least 11 women reported Ashley for harassment, assault, and threats of harm between 2015 and 2021. In 4 of these cases, the victims withdrew their statements after the matter was somehow settled amicably, but the other women were able to get restraining orders to prevent him from coming. Ashley brutally attacked and almost strangled one of his girlfriends at the beginning of 2021. Ashley was found guilty after the woman brought the case to court. However, he only had to deal with a fine, community service, and a restraining order that forbade him from getting in touch with the victim. Ashley severely injured another woman in an attack later that summer. She filed a police report accusing him of attempted harm after barely escaping. Ashley was mandated to have a mental health assessment this time. He was given a lenient sentence by the court, which included 3 months in jail and an order to reimburse the victim, even though it was determined that he posed a high risk of reoffending. Ashley targeted a second ex-girlfriend in 2022. He tried to strangle her after she left him by breaking into her room late at night. Her parents were awakened by the woman's scream, and they stepped in, called the police, and prevented her from suffering any more injuries. The court was lenient even in this case, giving Ashley a prison sentence of only 6 months. Only 3.5 months into his sentence, just before he met Danielle Finlay Jones, he was released. The horrific crime committed against Danielle Finlay Jones received a lot of media coverage, with news broadcasts and newspapers both devoting sections to the case. 14 more women came forward to police during the investigation, stating that they had also been harmed by Ashley Gaddy at different times, but had kept quiet out of concern for reprisals. There were notable parallels between their stories. After a few dates, Ashley changed from being a nice and charming guy to a predator who attacked, beat, and tried to strangle them. Interestingly, the offender only ever used his bare hands and never used any weapons. Many of these women testified as victims in court, expressing fear that Ashley would once more get away with little punishment, be freed, and seek retribution against them. Given how frequently the repeat offender had been given light sentences or administrative sanctions for serious offenses, their concerns appeared to be well-founded. Justice might finally catch up to Gaddy this time, it seemed. He was the direct target of overwhelming evidence that he had committed a horrible act. But before the formal sentencing could happen, Ashley was discovered hanging in his jail cell on April 6, 2024. Although it appeared that he had committed suicide, his actions raised suspicions. Ashley was certain that he would be deemed insane and placed in a more comfortable mental health facility rather than a jail cell, because he displayed no remorse for his actions. Given these facts, some believed that Ashley's cellmates may have contributed to his demise, especially since he had allegedly attacked them several times. Danielle's murder devastated her family. Her brother and mother found it difficult to deal with the loss and turned their sorrow into activism. They started advocating for more stringent laws governing dating apps, suggesting background checks that would automatically flag users with significant criminal records. By enabling people to recognize possible dangers before entering into a relationship, they aimed to assist others in avoiding unintentionally running into dangerous people. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.